I feel alive, calm. It makes me happy.
So they're coming to develop as a player, as an individual, but also as a team player. So they're learning teamwork and you're making new friends.
So it's just given me a lot of confidence to like start a conversation with people. It's been really good for me.
So I think that it just shows that all of these different things that you can gain from something that may seem like so small as doing your martial arts on a weekday evening, it's just amazing.
The benefits I've found since being a teacher at the circus school when it comes to our students is it improves attention and concentration. We do have a large number of students that have got special educational needs, and it's really helped them when it comes to things like confidence.
The kids here, it's interesting. A lot of them will find it quite different and they think, I want to try different, and different is now okay.
It's very helpful for mental health as well, in my opinion, because it keeps me social and it allows me to talk to people and I'm not like just sat alone in my room.
I've met an awful lot of lovely people. It means I go out a couple of times a week and then we do sing-outs at weekends, various places. It's fun, it's fun.
But you just forget about what you've been doing the day. And actually it's great for the next day because you feel like you've had a break from it. It's like I was having a weekend in the week. It's that sort of kind of release. It really is.
My goodness, it is such a big stress buster. It really is. All the endorphins start kicking in, they start flowing. You just feel 100% better in yourself after exercise.
I got into this because 5 years ago I was blessed with a little daughter who has a very rare genetic disorder called Costello syndrome, and it made me realize that not everyone is blessed with good health, so I wanted to kind of change that. We have a saying in Greece, if your body is healthy, your mind will be healthy as well. So yes, actually I do have more energy and I do have more appetite doing things, you know what I mean?
I got into it because basically one of my children was born with a heart defect, and I wanted to not be so selfish with my heart and start treating my heart with the respect that I should, really, and also be healthy for my kids and live a long healthy life and actually be there for them is the fundamental reason why I started to come.
Football makes me feel alive, calm. It makes me happy.
So they're coming to develop as a player, as an individual, but also as a team player. So they're learning teamwork and you're making new friends.
So it's just given me a lot of confidence to like start a conversation with people. It's been really good for me.
So I think that it just shows that all of these different things that you can gain from something that may seem like so small as doing your martial arts on a weekday evening, it's just amazing.
The benefits I've found since being a teacher at the circus school when it comes to our students is it improves attention and concentration. We do have a large number of students that have got special educational needs, and it's really helped them when it comes to things like confidence.
The kids here, it's interesting. A lot of them will find it quite different and they think, I want to try different, and different is now okay.
It's very helpful for mental health as well, in my opinion, because it keeps me social and it allows me to talk to people and I'm not like just sat alone in my room.
I've met an awful lot of lovely people. It means I go out a couple of times a week and then we do sing-outs at weekends, various places. It's fun, it's fun.
But you just forget about what you've been doing the day. And actually it's great for the next day because you feel like you've had a break from it. It's like I was having a weekend in the week. It's that sort of kind of release. It really is.
My goodness, it is such a big stress buster. It really is. All the endorphins start kicking in, they start flowing. You just feel 100% better in yourself after exercise.
I got into this because 5 years ago I was blessed with a little daughter who has a very rare genetic disorder called Costello syndrome, and it made me realize that not everyone is blessed with good health, so I wanted to kind of change that. We have a saying in Greece, if your body is healthy, your mind will be healthy as well.
So yes, actually I do have more energy and I do have more appetite doing things, you know what I mean?
I got into it because basically one of my children was born with a heart defect, and I wanted to not be so selfish with my heart, and start treating my heart with the respect that I should, really, and also be healthy for my kids and live a long healthy life and actually be there for them. It's the fundamental reason why I started to come.
I set up a pathway into a good life, I would say, because I feel that if you change the kids' lives, you change the future for the better. I'm doing it because for me there's not enough urgency out there for these kids that are dying. I can't live with that thought of that a child being stabbed on their own in the street, left to die, bleeding out, and everyone's outraged, but then next day they're going with their lives, and this child's lost their life and the whole family's destroyed. Our programs are for, I would say, the kids that are challenged, the ones that couldn't find themselves. Some of the kids it's just loneliness. Some of them they're in this thing too deep, they can't get out of it. Poverty, there's loads of different factors, so it's not just one. There's quite a few. The reason why I feel it's different to some of the projects out there is because we're not going in and finding out what's gone wrong with them. We're finding out who they are and helping them to discover that person. They're seeing things, believing it, and then they're believing in themselves and they're doing it. So we are different in the way of there's a way out. The traditional activities we brought in were all about community. The games that Bulldog run out, they're games that brought us together. Everyone in the area could play it. Everyone wanted to be part of it. It was fun. It took out your day. There's no mobile phones around, and everybody was included in it, and it actually built friendships. So everyone in the area would know each other. Whether you had a SCN or whatever, everyone played it because it was just something that was simple, but clever enough and fun. That's how I get kids to open their minds. By doing something different out of the ordinary that they've never tried. Because today you ask them questions and they'll say, "Oh no, I don't want to do that." But have you done it before? No. Well, how do you know you don't like it? We've done projects where we've had 10 kids all out of school, and we've got all 10 back into school. That's what kind of changes we're making. The thing that makes me feel good is to see them come out the other side and actually smiling and feeling safe, being a kid, and just living their life like they should be. That's definitely the highlight for me. Seeing them change into someone and become this butterfly, as I would say. Yeah.
Hello, I just wanted to allow a few more people to join, but I'm just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping and a welcome. So thank you for everybody who has already joined. I'm sure a few people will be joining in a little moment, so I'm just going to go through a little bit right now. So thank you so much for joining today. I really do hope that you find it useful. I'm just going to go through a bit of housekeeping before we go through our welcome talk. So each speaker is going to be speaking for around 20 minutes. And there'll be a question and answer section at the end of each speaker. If you wanted to engage on the chat feature, it is now open. So please feel free to put as many questions as you like in there for each speaker to answer at the end. If you want to engage with one another, please do so. This is an opportunity for you to get involved and really take as much as you want away from it. So before I take away from the welcome speech from Russell, this is Russell Teale. He is the co-founder of Vivify and the CEO, and he'll now go through a little bit of a welcome talk, and then I'll introduce what's going on for the rest of the day. So Russell, thank you for joining, and I'll just hand over to you.
Thanks, Anita. I think Anita, the video just needs to be changed on the setting for some reason. There we go. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Russell, and as Anita said, CEO and co-founder of Vivify. Today, we've got some fantastic speakers, as Anita says, but we thought we'd just do a quick intro to the company, what we're about, why we started the business, and hopefully tell you a little bit more about us. So the company was founded by myself and Elaine Swiss. We started the company mainly for two, huge goals and aspirations that we wanted. The main one being to help schools across the country, particularly with the challenges that you've faced, no doubt before COVID, during COVID, and now post-COVID, but also for communities as well. The challenges that you've all faced, the challenges that councils have faced, and the wider leisure community, particularly post-COVID, has been nothing short of something what we've never seen before. And the level of pressure that's been placed upon schools, particularly, is there to see. We work with hundreds of schools across the country, and we've spoken to thousands of schools throughout the time that we've been working within education, and the challenges do transcend across every single establishment. And we can see that, the challenges that are faced upon the pupil experience, school business leaders, mental health, not to mention teachers, but also the health and mental well-being of communities as well. Anita will talk through some stats later, I'm sure, around what's happened post-COVID, and particularly around the limitations around facilities across the country. So when Elaine and I kind of had that initial conversation of starting the company, that's very much what it was born out of. And people say you should always find a job that can get you out of bed in the morning. And this, working with Vivify and with schools and communities across the country absolutely, does that for us. And we feel extremely passionate about it. So we felt that real duty to almost help society in that sense, to create something that was sustainable, that could take that hassle away from schools, but still enable them to generate additional income and still serve their community. So clearly you serve your community quite evidently on a daily basis, not to mention the support that you offer pastorally as well. But then, we're able to provide that service for schools when, you're not necessarily able to do that, whether it's through technology or whether it's through, our team members sat out in the, certainly looking at today's weather, the cold, wet and wind, to make sure that those facilities do get open. And in doing that, like I said before, we're generating millions of pounds for schools across the country collectively, but also enabling people to live that kind of happier and healthier lifestyle, which, as we can see now, is becoming increasingly important. So yeah, as a company, that's very much what we stand for. That's very much what our team members stand for. And that's the kind of aligned goal and passion that we share every single day that, we get out of bed. So in terms of today, clearly it's not about us. It is about yourselves. We've got some fantastic guest speakers on today. We've got Stephen from the Institute of School Business Leaders. We've got Chris from Zenergi. We've also got Abbie from the Schools Advisory Service, and our very own Anita, Vivify. And hopefully you'll get some great insight today, hopefully some tools and techniques, no doubt with regards to energy, some of the kind of ever-changing breaking news that comes from there. And like I said, hopefully some little takeaways that will make your lives a little bit more easier when you do get back to school. So like I said, I hope you have a fantastic day and do take something away from it. And I'll hand back over to Anita.
Thanks so much, Russell. So the next speaker will be Stephen Morales from ISBL, CEO. So he's just going to be going through a little bit about ISBL. As I said, the chat feature is open. So if you have any questions for Stephen, please pop them in the chat and he will answer them right at the end. So Stephen, I'm just going to hand over to you. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you very much, Anita. Bear with me a second. I'll just share my slides with everybody. Is that coming through okay, Anita?
Yeah, perfect. I can see you.
Wonderful. Brilliant. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I mean, it was, I think it was a fitting start to the event that we were privileged to have a look at that that video clip where we saw people coming together in different communities and really changing the fortunes of some quite vulnerable people. I found that quite moving, quite inspiring, and actually it's exactly that I want to talk about today. Really, it's about collaboration. It's about how collaboration leads to success, and there's a really important message here as well about everyone being valued. As the first slide shows, everyone matters. They really do. And if we forget that, when we're thinking about the future of our schools and trusts, then we do so to our own detriment. So in terms of the ingredients for high performing schools and trusts, for me there are three fundamental ingredients, and those ingredients include culture, and what I mean there is that we buy into the ethos and the values of the organisation that we're working with, that those cultures, those values are well understood, and there's a real dialogue about what the organisation stands for. People are everything. If we don't invest in our people, if we don't look after our people, if we don't if we don't pay attention to their needs, then again, as an organisation, we will be both vulnerable and suboptimal. And then finally, structure. So and we talk a lot, don't we, about what is the best structure to deliver the best outcomes for children, and there's a huge conversation going on about an ambition, a government ambition, to have every school in a multi-academy trust by 2030. I think the evidence for a particular size of school and a particular legal structure is patchy. Certainly, certain structures have worked very well in certain contexts. Whether that's something that you can just pick up and drop to another context, I think again the evidence for that is a little bit patchy. But there are certainly elements of structures that work incredibly well. So I would say the combination of culture, investing in your people, and developing a structure that works for your context, absolutely fundamental. What underpins all of those things, those three things, is trust. If we don't trust each other, if leaders don't trust their teams, if teams don't trust their leaders, if governance arrangements are murky and opaque, and the motives of those with power is questioned, then it's very difficult for an organisation to move forward and succeed. So trust absolutely underpins those three things. But just like a stool, if we cut any one of those legs short, so if we cut the culture leg short, or the people leg short, or the structure leg short, then the stool will become wobbly and fragile. If we take one of those legs away, actually the stool will just fall over. So really important that we pay attention to those really those key things. And it's a bit of a cliche, but I think it's important that we say it, and sometimes we can lose our way when we are thinking about what next for our school or our trust, and that's making sure that everybody feels part of something bigger, that we feel that we are a member of a family, that we care for each other, and that we succeed and we fail together. Again, lots of talk about schools working collaboratively. Again, the government's ambition is for schools to work within hard legal structures, and the default for that is a multi-academy trust. I think the important thing, really, whether there's a hard legal structure or not, is that when schools are working together and working under a single brand, that they are as concerned and as invested in the success of the other schools in the trust as their own school. Sometimes we see that working brilliantly outside of the multi-academy trust environment. So foundation, diocesan schools doing really good things. Certainly some trusts do that brilliantly, but there are other trusts where they have come together almost in a marriage of convenience, if you like, and work in silos. So they're not actually collaborating. There's huge suspicion between the local school and the central team and the board of trustees, and that's exactly what we want to avoid. We all need to feel part of something more important than what's in front of us. And I'll talk a little bit as we go through these slides about my passion for joined up leadership, which is not only schools within trusts or schools within federations or foundations or diocesan groups working together, but also the leadership strands working in a more collaborative way. I mean, just again, I mean, I'm sure you've all seen this. You know, it's a bit bit old hat now, but I thought I'd throw it in because it's I think it's a good. It paints the right kind of picture, and this is when President Kennedy went to the NASA Space Center, and he found himself in front of the janitor, and he asked the question, "What are you doing here today?" And he said, "Well, Mr. President, I'm helping put a man on the moon." So whatever NASA had done, they had managed to instill a sense of being part of something bigger in all of their teams. Now we don't know how contrived or rehearsed it was, but I think if we could get to that place, if we could get all of our teams absolutely understanding that the ultimate goal of the School of the Trust is to improve children's life chances, and we ask that question of site colleagues or caretakers or peripatetic staff, and they could, you know, very confidently say, you know, I'm here to improve children's life chances, I think we'd be in a really good place. So I talked about my passion for joined up leadership, and I've recently published a piece of research that involved conversations with all of the sector leaders. So the general secretaries from the big head teacher unions, NHT and ASCL, Leora Crudis from Confederation of School Trusts, the Education Policy Institute, Policy First, Alison Peacock from the Chartered College of Teachers, Professor Toby Salt, who used to be the Deputy Chief Executive of the National College, and of course, perhaps more importantly than all of that really, are many conversations, many interviews with frontline school business professionals. And there was a big element of you know, what's the existing knowledge, what does the existing literature tell us, and what it tells us actually is that we have created, since probably the mid 70s, hierarchies in schools which are really difficult to dismantle. So when Margaret Thatcher began her ambition to remove government's involvement in, and certainly local government involvement in, the oversight of education, and invested a lot of power into the head teacher, and you know, a decade later, perhaps even a little bit more, we started to see the emergence of superheads. The head was expected to be across absolutely everything, not only teaching and learning, but finance, the sustainability of the school premises, and everything else. And so when we have found ourselves in this new landscape where local authorities are unable to support schools in the way that they could, it's fallen squarely on the shoulders of many head teachers to deal with things that frankly they were never trained to do. And it's taken a long time, and we're still not there. There still needs to be a further paradigm shift in terms of head teachers being comfortable with doing what they do best, and that's leading teaching and learning, leading pedagogy, and allowing other colleagues with other specialisms to support them. And as the complexity ramps up, and it's only going to get increasingly more challenging, you know, we're at the moment we'll see what happens with the school bill, but I'm pretty sure that they will push on with what's called the review of regulatory review and commissioning, which involves the amalgamation of 3 fundamental documents certainly for trust, and that's the school and academies, the Academy Trust Handbook, the funding agreement, and the independent school standards. The idea is to bring those 3 documents together, have a single regulatory framework, increase the powers that the Secretary of State has, and in turn regional directors. And what that means is that schools are going to have to pay, and trust in particular, are going to have to pay a lot more attention to compliance. And it is going to require people with really deep technical knowledge of HR, of premises, of technology, of finance, and so forth. So the stakes are getting higher. The scrutiny is going to be more intense. The complexity is ramping up. So we do need highly skilled professionals beyond our education leaders to support schools and trusts going forward. And what this research really tells us is that there is still, if you like, there's some tension and some mistrust between pedagogical leaders, school business leaders, and indeed those responsible for governance. And we're not universally, we're not working as seamlessly together as we should be. We don't have the right people around the table. We're still operating in silos. We still gravitate to our own areas of expertise, and that needs to shift. And it's a shift that has taken place in the health sector. If you look at where NHS trusts were probably a decade and a half ago, when senior administrators were at loggerheads with clinicians, you know, the brain surgeon would say to the senior administrator, "What do you know about hospitals?" And the senior administrator would turn to the brain surgeon and say, "The only thing you know is brain surgery," and actually they need to meet somewhere in the middle, and they have. And things are much better now, but it's the kind of shift we need to see in education if we're going to progress and ultimately end up with this world-class education system that is alluded to in the white paper. But for those that haven't engaged in this piece of research, it's worth a read. Even if you just go to the very back of the document and look at the key findings and the recommendations. Just a little bit on developing a culture of continuous improvement. I think, and it's difficult, isn't it? At this point, we are doing everything we can just to keep afloat, just to manage day to day, and it's very difficult to get our head in the kind of development, continuous improvement space. But I think if we aren't thinking about developing as individuals, about developing as organisations, then we're in that kind of space of apathy, which I think is a downward spiral, and we've got to break that however we can. I think this graphic kind of really underpins what continuous improvement is about, and it starts with a compelling awareness of the shared ambition, the shared goals. You could add to that clarity over the end game, and we've alluded to that in the previous slides. once you've got that compelling awareness and that clarity of purpose, then of course you need a robust strategy with underpinned by your vision and your mission, and clear deliverables. And again, it's important that those key deliverables are understood right the way through the organisation. They're not in granular detail, but certainly at the highest level, they need to be understood. And then we start to do some process mapping, don't we? We start to say, well, okay, here's the strategy, here are the deliverables, who's going to do what, when, what are the milestones we need to achieve, and how are we then managing performance, which is the last triangle in the continuous improvement cycle. And once we've done that performance management piece, and we've reflected on how things have gone, then that feeds the next cycle of goal setting. And this isn't a continuous improvement cycle that is exclusively for senior leaders, for senior executives and trust boards. This is for everybody. Everybody should be on this loop, from the most senior person in a school or a trust to the junior administrative clerk or the part-time caretaker. It really doesn't matter. Everybody should be on this cycle one way or another, all pulling in the same direction. A little bit around values-based performance, and that really is what the rest of the slides before this one have been about. That we are absolutely clear about the purpose and the values of the organisation that we work for, and we perform against those values. They underpin the ethos. A good values-based approach to performance will transform not just the life chances of children, which is of course the main goal, but it will transform every member of staff and anybody that's invested in the school, including governors, trustees, and those parents that get involved in school life. In fact, get it right, and in the end, this is what Vivify do so well. It will transform the whole community. Values-based performance supports progression, it encourages progression, and it helps develop a talent pipeline. And as a system, that's so important. When we see the number of people that are leaving the profession for a number of reasons, and that might be workload or pay or work-life balance, it's so important that we address that, but at the same time that we create aspirational routes for those that are currently working within our structures, and we should be encouraging colleagues that are subordinate to us to be clipping our heels, ready to take on our roles in the near future. Just conscious of time, and I don't want to run over, so I need to jump in at any time. I've got a couple more slides, but there's an exercise that is worth carrying out, and I'm sure Anita, we can share the live version of this. But essentially, it asks you to reflect on your organisation's capability and proficiency, and we use our professional standards. We line up various groups within the organisation, and we say, in a competency score from 1 to 5, where do you see yourself? It takes a bit of probing, because sometimes people will, well, actually, quite often CEOs and SLT members will overscore in the areas of finance human resources in particular, and you have to do a little bit of digging and say, actually, do you really know? Are you really highly proficient in finance, or are you saying you've seen budgets over the 10 years of your career? So sometimes you've got to go a bit deep with the questioning. But if you get honesty out of this, what you'll end up with is a dashboard which will show red, amber, green, because each of those cells, depending on the score that you apply, will return a green, red, or amber colour. And when you look at that dashboard, what it will tell you is where you're vulnerable. Now it doesn't doesn't require every single group to be highly proficient in every single area. What it requires is that there is somebody in the organisation, or a number of people within the organisation, who have high levels of proficiency in all those areas, so they're covered off. If that isn't the case, then you have three choices. You either need to think about outsourcing, you need to think about recruiting new talent into the organisation, or ideally, you need to be saying, well, we're not quite there yet, but let's invest in that individual and let's get them there, and let's work out how long it's going to take us to get to the place that we need to get to in terms of feeling confident that that area is covered off within our organisation. So again, Anita, I'm sure we can share this, and colleagues can use it as they see fit. Just very quickly, for those that haven't seen our professional standards, they're actually under review at the moment. They cover all the main operational areas of a school or a trust, and wrapped around the disciplines, there are a number of behaviours, and those behaviours, I think, talk to some of the slides that I've been working through this morning. We have gone. We believe we've added quite a lot of rigour in light of the requirements on schools now. Finance in particular now maps directly to the Academy Trust Handbook, and any changes in accounting regulations. We've worked with the Chartered Institute of Procurement on the procurement area. We've worked with CIPD on the human resource area. We've worked with the Chartered Institute of Marketing in marketing, and infrastructure is multi-layered. In infrastructure, we've got technology, we've got premises, we've got health and safety, we've got risk. The new version of the professional standards we hope to publish in January. But in the meantime, if you want to look at the existing standards, they're there on our website. It's an interactive tool. You can work your way through each of the segments and go into the detail, and you'll see there are tiers from 1 to 4. So from entry level all the way through to executive level against each of those standards. And just very quickly, we offer a portfolio of qualifications. We offer toolkits and training, resources, webinars, seminars, roundtable environments to talk about the key issues in education. We oversee the Diploma 4, 5 and 6 qualification that was formerly the Certificate Diploma and Advanced Diploma run by the National College, now being delivered by a number of respected providers, including Best Practice Network and Serco. We run an APEL route with a number of universities, so you can convert your experience into a degree. There are a range of funded SBP apprentice pathways, and if your school or trust is paying into levy, almost inevitably there will be, there'll be a pot of money available to fund those programs. If you want more detail, please reach out. We run a specific qualification for aspiring COOs and CFOs, and we run a number of postgraduate qualifications, again with respected universities. They tend to be very research based. And finally, Anita, if you would just indulge me, we are very excited to be launching a new trust group membership offer. The only prerequisite is that there is one full member of the institute within a trust, and then we will open up membership to all other members of that trust, and it will give those colleagues access to resources and toolkits, career progression advice, guidance on CPD, and what I think will be in a lot of trust minds is their growth plans, and we can help with due diligence, we can help with planning, we can help with the kinds of conversations they need to have with key stakeholders in their to support their thinking as they contemplate the future. For more information about any of the things I've talked about, please drop us a line at info@isbl.org.uk. Lovely to speak to you all. Thanks, Anita.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Stephen. That was really, really insightful. And I hope that everybody on the chat is able to take at least one thing away from it. Is anybody got any questions? The chat feature is open, so please feel free to ask some questions. Whilst I'll give people a couple of minutes to see if they've got any questions for you, Stephen. There's none at the moment. So if you could say one thing, if people could take away from your presentation today, what would you say the main thing is for them to take away as a bit of a nugget of information? Put you on the spot now.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, I think the main thing is look, it's super uncertain times. I can't predict what's going to happen with government policy, particularly with a government that is in a precarious situation at the moment. I think the school, the white paper, the broad ambition of the white paper will continue. So I would suggest that what colleagues need to do is think about where their school is or their trust is today, and where it might be in 3 years' time, and where they fit within that structure, and how they develop themselves to prevail, to succeed. Now, you know, some colleagues will want to stay in their local environments and perform a generalist role, and some will want to progress into central teams and become executives. But you know, it doesn't matter what your flavour is, but just be ready. Just be ready to grasp opportunity when it comes your way. In this ever-changing time, what I don't think you can do is kind of stand still, because you know you'll get left behind, frankly. And I think there's a huge opportunity for school business professionals. Seize the moment, have a look around you, think about the future, and you know, if anybody wants help and support, we're happy to talk.
Absolutely, thank you so much for that. I think you mentioned it earlier in your slides that it's a profession that a lot of people have decided to leave for various different reasons, as it is a very testing time with things changing very quickly and essentially overnight. So I think Stephen's got loads of resources available. Obviously his details are on the screen now. At the end of the webinar, I'm going to give everybody the opportunity to answer a questionnaire/survey, which will allow you to request the slides and share your information with each of the speakers. So somebody did ask in the chat, for anybody that has added to the chat before that was asked. So somebody asked if the slides will be shared. Absolutely. Everybody can get the slides from each one of the speakers, so there'll be an opportunity at the end to request them. But Stephen, I don't think there's any other questions for now, but there is a question time right at the end in the summary. So if you do think of anything, please do pop it in the chat and we will address it at the end. But Stephen, thank you so much for sharing your presentation and your time with us today.
Pleasure, thank you very much.
Perfect. So I'm just going to now mute Stephen and share my screen. Perfect. So my name is Anita. I am Head of School Partnerships at Vivify Venues. Thank you so much for joining Vivify's first webinar. I hope you do really enjoy it, and it's the first of many. I'm now going to speak a little bit about Vivify and what we do. So we look after school community lettings. We help schools generate additional revenue for various different things. I'm going to go through the slides. So whether your school is in a deficit or essentially just needs to raise more funds, that's where we fit in. But there's a number of different things and the reasons why we have started Vivify Venues, and I'll go through that in a bit more detail. But before we do that, I just want to get everybody a little bit more engaged. I know it's early in the morning. So there's a few questions on the screen, which I would like you just to ask yourself, really, just to go through and just to set the tone for the presentation. So is your school or MAT working to a deficit? So if it's in a deficit, how much is that? What kind of money would you need to help your school budget? And if it's not in a deficit, how much money do you need? And that's for the nice to have kind of things, that list that is ever growing, but things kind of take precedent, which is taken away from the things that you would like to do. And if you're not in a deficit, what is it that you would like to do with that money, should you wish to have a lump sum money, an annual turnover to invest back into the school? I'll just give you a few minutes just to have a little bit of a think about that. And the next slide. So in regards to the facilities that you have at your school, if you just have a look at the screen, this is some information that we have taken, an average facility for revenues. So for the facilities that you have at your school, if you just have a look at the annual turnover that you could actually make, and just make a little bit of a mental note on what are the facilities that you have and how much that could equate to, put it back into your budget. So why let out your facility? So this is a little bit about why Vivify Venues started and what we do and what we try and help schools do. So why let out your facilities? So there's a number of different reasons why this can help you and your school. So during the lockdown period, around 1 in 3 leisure centres actually got closed down. So for some people, this was the only time that they could actually have interaction with other people. So for that to be closed down, that had a real detrimental effect on their mental health. So by opening your school up and letting out your facilities, you're actually allowing the community to come together, essentially opening your school doors as a hub for your community. So it really does allow schools to be the heart of a community and help people with their mental health, their well-being. Of course, that's going to equate to money, as I mentioned, and you've seen in the previous slide how much that could equate to going back into your budget, how that could help you, your school and the pupil experience. Now, what you can do with that is when you're generating footfall through the doors and opening your school up to the local community, people are aware of your school and what it's doing, and people are speaking about it. The local community and higher groups that are coming into your school have the opportunity to grow their business and expand. So, of course, they're highlighting your school in the way that you've helped their business grow. The people that are attending the groups also, they are coming in, having a fun time. I'm not sure if all of you were on the chat at the start, but there was a few testimonials and groups which we work with, which really showed how the groups are allowing them to boost their well-being and be included within a group. It's allowing you to raise a school profile. And with that, if you are struggling with pupil numbers, it's assisting that pupil recruitment period where you are obviously needing pupils to come to your school. If you're under recruited, it's really showcasing your school to allow footfall to come through that door. And with that, with you opening your school doors up to different higher groups and your local community, with them being on site within the evening periods, for example, most lettings can open between sort of 5 o'clock till 9, 10 o'clock at night. It's also a deterrent if you have any antisocial behaviour on site. So some things to consider should you wish to get started with opening your school up to lettings. Now, a few of you on the call have already reached out and said, you know, you already do lettings, and quite a few of you on the call don't do lettings. Now, if wherever you are within your journey, we want to give you a few tips today to allow you to expand on the lettings or get started. So getting started with opening your school doors to community lettings, these are some of the things which you wish to consider. Now, there's a number of things on the screen. However, I really do want to start with staffing, as I think it's paramount to the running of a school. And sometimes we think about trying to increase revenue, and that's why we're all on the chat today, to manage school budgets and generate revenue. But I think it's so important to consider our staff in this and how we're actually going to do it. So with the staff that you have on site, how are you going to open and lock up the school? So are you going to have a lettings team on site? Are you going to outsource this? And if so, are you going to provide training? So is this going to be an opening the school and closing the school process, or is it going to be more of an experience for the groups that are coming into your school, as well as the higher groups that are paying money to let it out? And if you are going to let out your facilities, what facilities do you have which are available to generate revenue? Of course, there's going to be some on costs which are going to occur when you open the school doors, which our colleague Chris from Zenergi is going to run through in his slides a little bit about the energy costs as well. So how much do you need to generate for it to be viable for your school? Internal events, of course, with your school, essentially it's a school rather than a leisure centre and a business. So have you got any internal events which are going to take precedent over lettings? And if so, what are they? For example, your training days or parents' evening open days. And then, of course, holidays. Should you wish to open during holidays, which is a very lucrative time for you to generate revenue for your school, are you going to have the staff to open and close up the school? And if not, how are you going to outsource that? And that obviously takes us on to resources and the approval process. So the approval process, how many groups are you going to allow into your school? And are there any restrictions as to your values of a school? For example, we work with a lot of religious schools. Is there going to be any conflict with other churches, for example, in the area? Have you got any alliances that you would like to obviously keep intact? Are there any specific groups which you wouldn't like into your school? All of these things are things to consider. And then, of course, insurance, the groups which you are engaging with, have they got insurance, and have you got insurance to have them on site? A few other things to consider are on the screen, and I'm going to go through them in a little bit more detail. The first one being marketing. So for schools of larger sizes, you may have a department which looks after lettings. You may have a marketing team. And for some of the schools, they might not have that. But we've split this up into 3 different sections as to things to consider within the marketing sort of arena. So how will you reach hirers? So of course, with amazing facilities that you have on site, a number of different hirers may already be aware of the school and the facilities which they have. Of course, if you have, for example, a 3G pitch with some great floodlights, it will generate some attention itself. But if you have some amazing facilities inside, which people aren't aware of, how are you really going to show people what facilities you have, and who's going to be responsible for sharing the details about the school and the facilities and what you have available? How are you going to communicate? We are so rich of social media platforms now, and I know that some people are a little bit against social media. However, I haven't come across a school without a Twitter page nowadays. So how are you going to communicate? Is it going to be via social media? Are you going to have a designated website for lettings? And what is your budget around this? Have you got a budget in place whereby you are going to designate this to marketing for your lettings? And what is the booking process going to be? So how are you going to have hirers contact you? How are they going to know the availability? Because it can be quite timely. And then, of course, that's going to implement on your staff time. So I know a lot of school business managers do it themselves at the moment. From a number of schools which I've visited, they've said, you know, it's sort of a evening and weekend kind of thing. So how is that going to impact your staff and their day-to-day roles? How are the hirer groups going to book? And will it be GDPR compliant? These are all things that you may need to consider. And then, of course, with marketing, it needs to be visual. Who's going to take the photos, or have you got photos available? And to just put amazing descriptions. Of course, Vivify Venues do this, and how we've made it successful is to really capture the facilities of a school and really showcase them, as they are amazing. And you know, schools invest so much time, money and effort into the upkeep of them that we really need to describe them in the way that they are. You know, how many, for example, a sports hall. A sports hall could be various different sizes. You could have 2 badminton courts, you could have 6. And there's a big difference between the two for hirer groups that really want the information readily available. Finance, so setting your pricing and competitor reviews. So the best way to set your price and to make sure that you're comparable but competitive is to have a look at competitors within the area to see that you are going to be comparable. You're not going to outprice yourself, but you are going to be competitive so that people are encouraged to come to your school and use your facilities, which of course feed your budget. Community bookings. Community bookings, I think, is such an important one. Of course, I spoke at the beginning about leisure centres being closed down, and for people's mental health really being affected because of that. Are you going to have a set rate, or are you going to have a community bookings fee where you can actually discount your rate for community hirers or people within your local community, so they get a discounted rate for obviously encouraging business within your local community, feeding your budget, as well as another local group? And agreed pricing. So this could work on both ways, as I mentioned, with the community bookings, also with your hirer groups, encouraging them to have block bookings rather than ad hoc bookings. A really big benefit of that is so that, you know, the school can really see how much they're going to be getting on a month-to-month basis. With ourselves, the majority of our bookings are for all year round. And the brilliance of that is schools can really see the tangible difference that money is going to make, and essentially they can see where they can spend it. With yourselves, if you were to manage this process yourself, another thing to consider is how your payment process is going to work, how people are going to pay your school, and also your VAT calculations. Who is responsible for that? Again, from some of the schools that I've worked with, there's a facilities team or a school business manager potentially that look after lettings. are they also going to be responsible for the finance side of things? Or are you going to have a designated person within the finance team that is responsible? And again, something to consider is how that's going to impact their day-to-day role. And obviously if they are going to be required to pay more for additional duties. Operational. So having a look at your site to make sure that it is ready to let out and that it's safe. I mentioned insurance previously. However, have health and safety checks been taken into account if you are managing this yourself? First aid training to make sure that if there was an accident on site, is there procedures drawn up? Is there a manual, for example? This is definitely something which I would suggest for schools to do, especially if they are looking after lettings themselves, is to make sure that there is a manual drawn up in place for the people that are opening and locking the schools, as well as a procedure in place for higher groups to know what they need to do should there be an emergency. If you are opening the doors to your facilities, a number of times when I've been on site and been speaking to schools, an objection which I've had is, which I'm sure many of you will say is correct, is that teachers don't want their classrooms to be used and abused, essentially, that they want to make sure that their facilities are exactly how they left them the night before, and they are usable to teach their children. And that's paramount to a school. We need to not take away from what a school is all about, and that's the education of the children. And that can't be put on the back burner, essentially. So what is in place to make sure that your teachers feel comfortable with their spaces being used, whether that's the sports point, it's your PE teachers, or it's a classroom and tables and chairs being used. Safeguarding. I think this happens more in sort of the early years primary schools, where children leave out their workbooks and sort of personal details, letters, things like that. How are we going to safeguard them? Are we going to have to draw something up in place to ensure that they are safeguarded? Is there a procedure in place to clear up desks before lettings go live? And if so, is that popped in your manual? And then cleaners. Cleaners is a big thing to make sure that the site is clean for the next day, to make sure that everything is up and running for your school. Competition. So as I mentioned before with pricing, it's really important to be realistic with it, and also not selling yourself short. So many schools that we have previously worked with have given us sort of their pricing structure if they have done lettings themselves. And it is very cheap. And I appreciate schools are not commercial and they have alliances within the local community. However, play to your strengths. If there are some fantastic facilities, and especially if there is similar sort of facilities in the local area which are charging double, it's okay to kind of be comparable. But of course, do your research and make sure that you are having a look at what other people are doing in the local community. Have a look at Google Maps and other schools' websites. I know so many of you in the chat have come from school business manager groups and head teacher groups where you are in contact with one another in your local borough, your local authority. It's important to help each other and to let each other know what you are charging. And if not, then popping on other people's websites, school websites, to see how much they are generating themselves. Key challenges. So some of the challenges that you might face when considering lettings. Now, I appreciate it's a big beast, and opening your school to the local community and higher groups can be quite a daunting thing, as there are a number of different challenges around it. So a few of them are on the screen at the moment. So just the awareness really around the lettings market. If you haven't done it before, it can be quite difficult to get your hands around if it's something new. But like I said, drawing on other people's experiences, like people within the education sector and other staff colleagues in the industry, what have they done, what's worked well from them, sharing practices is a really important thing. But it is quite a timely thing, so making sure that you have enough time within the day to do it, and you have the right staff to do it as well. As I said, a number of people which I've spoken to, some in the chat today, have said, this is something that's taken over my weekends and my evenings. So ensuring that staff have the right resources and support to manage lettings efficiently. And then facilities that are not required, often due to wear and tear, considering that what facilities you have and what standards there are at. also the wear and tear of the building, how lettings will implement that, and setting aside some of the money which you are going to be generating back into facilities. Now, obviously, if you are in a deficit, it's great to have that money to put back into the budget, but also having a look at things that you would need for the school for the year. And that's why I said with bookings for all year round, it's a really great thing to see how much tangible cash that you're going to have, so that you can set it aside for things that you need in the school, whether that's reinvesting into the pupil experience or the facilities. And then another challenge that you may have is buy-in from head teachers, trustees, governors, and other teachers. So addressing those before, of course, you get started, and making sure that everybody is on board. This is quite a big thing for schools to do, but a really important one for not only the children, local community and the school, but also for the wider community, whether that's children that attend the school or parents of the children, or people that aren't associated to the school already. As I said, it really just brings the attention to the school, showcases the school, and really highlights it for a brilliant thing that it can do, opening their doors for a community and allowing your school to be the hub. So the problem which schools are currently facing at the moment and the local community. So for schools, you know, as Stephen's mentioned, whether it's culture, whether it's squeezed budgets, it's a really difficult time for schools, especially financially, with utilities costs increasing. Chris from Zenergi is going to go through that in a little bit more details, but it's an ever-changing time, and it's a really difficult time for schools. I think this is the toughest time to be in education, hence why so many people are leaving the sector, which is really sad, with the time that's been invested into their training to get into education and the love that they have for teaching or for education. It's really sad to see so many people struggling. Another problem that schools are facing is obviously regulations, Ofsted, and the pressures around that. COVID put a real big strain on schools, as if it wasn't hard enough already. So these are some of the problems that schools are facing and that you guys are facing on a day-to-day basis, which of course need to be considered. Alongside with the community, the inactivity and loneliness, as I mentioned, with so many businesses being shut down, whether they were business owners or attendees of them, it was a really difficult time, and it's really, really kind of lonely. Now, every £1 invested on community and sports given, the return on the NHS is £3.91. I'm going to skip over to the next slide to put that in a little bit more in context. So 96% of children in the UK aged 7 to 11 years old will not have the fundamental skill to stay alive if they got into difficulty in water. That's a really, really scary stat, and that was from Swim England. And I think a lot of the issue behind that is not having the money. If you're having the amazing opportunity to have a swimming pool on site, that's great, but the commissioning is so expensive. And for people that are in a deficit budget, I think I would say over 90% of the schools which I visited with facilities, their swimming pools aren't commissioned anymore because it's just so difficult for them to fund it. And that's where letting your school out and getting that money in the budget can really help, not only for your school, but with 96% of children leaving education without that fundamental life skill, it's a really scary stat. With 1 in 3 children finishing school overweight and obese, so with 96% of the children without the fundamental skill to swim, it's likely that they're not going to go to a swimming pool and go swimming on the weekends, which is something which I did as a child. So obviously that goes hand in hand with the overweight and obesity levels increasing. I've mentioned a few times in terms of the leisure centres being closed, energy costs increasing, and physical inactivity associated with 1 in 6 deaths, and its estimated cost to the UK of 7.4 billion. Now, it's just enormous amounts of money, and the problem is with us not working together to open more and more facilities, it's only going to increase, and it's a huge problem. So not only would you be helping your school, you're helping sort of the wider community and next generation, which is great. So the solution, as I've mentioned, opening sports pitches, studios, swimming pools, 3G pitches, even classrooms, getting people together. 39% of sporting facilities are behind school gates. So we can really be part of a bigger movement here, not only helping your school, but helping everybody in the community. So now, if you're doing this yourself, I've gone through a number of different things which are things to consider if you're doing it. However, there are different lettings providers. So these are a few things on the screen for you to consider, and some advantages, whether it's a fully managed solution or a non-exclusive aggregator. You know, from having a lot of exposure and showing availability with a fully managed solution, the school has no responsibility whatsoever. For those of you that don't know what a fully managed solution is, it's essentially not only a booking management solution, but also staffing. So the provider would be responsible for locking up and closing the school. If you're doing it yourself, it could be just a locking and closing up of the school, but with a fully managed solution, there is a lot more to it. If you're working with an external provider, for example, with ourselves, our staff are put on a training platform. They are trained to a high level of standard. It's not a locking and closing up procedure. They are a host, so they'll be hosting your school and really providing an experience for the hirers and the community that are coming through that door. So I'm going to go through a little bit about Vivify. Obviously, at the start of the call, Russ outlined why we do what we do and why it's so important to us. So Vivify started with a real social purpose, and this wasn't just to help education. This was to help local communities and trying to help schools really get themselves out of a deficit budget, helping them with budgets being so tight at the moment, and they have been for many different years, and it's just going, the trajectory for it is not going in the right direction. So we really wanted to get together and help schools, and like I said, really change this movement, be part of a movement of opening facilities rather than them being closed. We wanted to be a part of opening facilities, having a safe space for people to come to, whether it's school pupils that haven't got anything to do with their extracurricular after school. They have nothing to do, which can obviously increase antisocial behaviour. From parents, which the only thing that they are is parents, you know, them being able to come together and enjoy each other's time. There's a number of different videos available on our YouTube to see live testimonials of how this has had a real impact on people. Now, Vivify Venues have two different options which you can choose from for schools, which is a booking management solution and also a fully managed solution, which I have gone through. So we have a proactive sales team, marketing and advertising team. All of our teams are in-house, we don't outsource. So you'll be always speaking to somebody at Vivify. We work with schools to achieve your aims and objectives. No two schools are the same. So we really do spend the time in investing in your school to ensure that we know what's important to you, what you're looking for, and what you're trying to achieve. So we will work with the school to increase budgets, put revenue back into a school, help your local community. And by doing that, we will offer our team to you. Our team will become an extension of your school. Rather than an outsourced company, we like to see ourselves as an extension of your school, really working with you on a day-to-day basis to achieve your goals, increasing that revenue and helping your pupils. So we're proud to be working with over 90 schools across the UK, some of which are listed at the bottom. We are present in every region within the UK. So, you know, there is always going to be somebody, a school close to you. So if you are looking for any testimonials or you would like some case studies, please do reach out and let us know. And we can also pop you in contact with some of those schools, which can really explain to you from a school's perspective, their journey, how they've got involved and how it's implemented change within their school. So next steps. So if you would like a free facility audit, everybody that's on the call today is entitled to one. Contact details are on the screen and a telephone number. So should you wish to arrange a free facilities audit, please do reach out to the address which is on the screen. As I said, at the end of the webinar, there is going to be an opportunity for you to request the slides and for somebody to get in contact with you. So if you can't take pictures of it right now, please don't worry. It will be sent out to you at the end of the webinar. All of the things which I have gone through today, it can be very, very overwhelming, but it is super rewarding to open your school up to your local community. As I said, you are going to be part of a wider movement, and I hope together we can really change sort of budgets being squeezed and we can really put money back into budgets. Okay, I'm going to now stop sharing my screen and I'm going to go through some of the questions that are on the chat. And if there is any questions, please do let me know. I think there's a number of things that have been answered. Perfect. I think everybody has had their questions answered. Yes, so everybody can have a copy of the slide should they wish. So thank you so much for listening. I hope there was some information which you can take away and implement within your school and it's been useful. I'm now going to stop sharing my screen, which I think is done, and I'm going to hand over to Chris from Zenergi, who I think we are longer waiting to hear what he has to say. We promise you won't boo you, Chris. We know it's not your fault, but I'll leave it over to you now. So Chris, Jeremy from Zenergi.
Thank you very much, Anita, and thanks very much for having me. Let me see if I can just share the screen. Cool. So the wonderful world of energy right now. Hopefully you can all see that. Okay. So yeah, navigating the energy crisis. I'm sure there's quite a few questions in your minds right now. I've done similar presentations to 4 different groups so far in the last week and a half, and you know, the questions from the audience at the very beginning that, you know, I like to kind of get that feedback and feel as to, you know, what's the word on the street, what do you need to know. A lot of it is about how to save energy and how to sort of mitigate the impact of price rises. It's also around the impact of obviously like the government scheme, the energy bill relief scheme, and how that could work. But also, you know, what should you be doing in terms of a strategy and helping to reduce the impact on your budget in the future. So hopefully I'll cover those critical things off, but please do chip in and add things to the chat as we go, and hopefully I can answer those questions at the end as well. So we've got a lovely graph here that shows the situation and what's been going on in the energy markets over the last year. This is the gas price, and you'll see in green we've got all the things that helped the prices actually come down, which was good news, and then we've got lots of orange, which is effectively the bad news. And there's been lots more significant bad news over the last 12 months than good, unfortunately. So there's your positive takeaway for the day. I don't think we need to necessarily go through all of the detail necessarily, but clearly we've had sanctions. We're in obviously a war situation right now that's resulted in very stretched supply to Europe. And that has had shockwaves for the industry, and the sentiment in the market is effectively increased substantially. That has been coupled with a summer of extreme heat, which has increased electricity demand for air conditioning use on the continent. And then also we've got the whole situation where nuclear power stations are getting towards the end of their lifetimes and being decommissioned. That's happened in France. They're pretty much half their fleet went down over summer. So therefore more people had to generate their electricity from gas, and that therefore pushed up the prices further. It's all supply and demand ultimately, as we're well aware. The good news is things have started to soften off. So where we hit the peak about 3-4 weeks ago, it's been coming off quite nicely. And actually yesterday we saw a 10% drop off generally across the forward markets as a result of the sentiment around the current temperatures being quite mild. We've got a very windy period at the moment, which again helps to reduce the amount of electricity demand for the actual gas commodity itself. So that pushes the price down as well. So there's kind of good news, but let's face it, the whole situation is terrible. And this is just kind of how terrible it is when we start looking back over a longer term. So this graph actually goes back to 2013. So we've got 9 years worth of energy markets, and you know, there's times back in sort of 2018 where I used to get very excited about these price rises. You know, wow, substantial increases. You know, energy budgets doubling compared to the sort of rolling average prices. And now look how insignificant they really are. So that was actually the beast of the East back there in 2018. And you know, look at the situation that we have right now. Obviously, a lot of it has been around the war situation, as I've covered. This is actually electricity, but the 1 year graph I showed you on the gas on the previous slide it almost follows exactly the same trend, because gas and electricity prices follow suit, mainly because electricity is reliant on gas for generation across a number of countries around the world, really. And we can't always rely on wind and solar energy that we are now getting better at, and is obviously helping to reduce our carbon emissions with. So the government have brought out the energy bill reduction scheme. And for those of you that might have secured a contract since April this year, this is good news for you, because as long as you've secured a contract price above the wholesale cap, so let me be clear on it, it's the wholesale commodity price that's being capped here, not the non-commodity element. And as long as you've exceeded that threshold, then they'll effectively reduce that price down for you. And we're kind of waiting to see how that actually feeds through to supplier invoices. So we're actually in that period now from October through to April, where they've said that this reduction will happen. Whether it'll be a line on your invoice that just says EBRS reduction, who knows, whether it'll just be a reduced actual unit rate that they pass on. But again, lots of people asking me about, will their deal be affected from 2 years ago that they fixed for 4 years? And the answer, unfortunately, is no, but you're actually paying probably about 1/10 of the price that some of the people that have secured the contracts this year would be. So, if you're not affected, don't feel like you're losing out, because you're not being affected for a good reason, and you actually should be sitting relatively pretty right now. So this kind of wholesale, non-wholesale element here is the bit to kind of really sort of go into, because a lot of people have seen the price caps. So I'll just cover them off in this slide. On the wholesale price, which is 21.1 and 7.5 on electricity and gas respectively, only for contracts secured from 1st of April. Now, the actual non-commodity element, all of the various different charges that also go into your unit rates that you charge, are not being capped. You're still going to have to pay that, and you're also then going to have this capped wholesale price on top. So don't think that you're going to get a bill come through that's going to say 21.1 for elec and 7.5 for gas, because it won't. Also, just in terms of flex, these rates are changing readily, and I think this scheme is kind of a little bit up in the air, I think it's fair to say. That actually these prices came down on, was it Monday, I think, this week, from about 25% higher. These are the maximum discounts that you'd get if you're in a flexible contract or a variable contract. Okay, so just in terms of how it will work, hopefully this graph kind of explains it. So in this situation, we've got somebody that's paying 60 pence on their unit rate. And that is made up of both the commodity with the orange arrow and also the non-commodity. Just to give you a bit of a briefing on the non-commodity, that is things like renewables obligation, feed-in tariff scheme, the cost of keeping the national grid balanced, and various different incentives and ways to make sure that the lights stay on for us. Now, of that 60 pence, about 20 pence of that effectively forms that blue part of the graph. So that's what you'll all pay. But then on top of that, you'll then have the capped price for 6 months at 21.1p. And then after the 6 months is up, unless they extend the cap, crystal ball time, you'll be paying, in this situation, it'll be 41.1p for winter, and then you'll go on back to the 60 pence for summer. Hopefully that makes some kind of sense, but if you need any help on it, we can help you work out what the actual wholesale price is for your contracts if you secured it from 1st of April, because it's that's effectively being reduced down, not the non-wholesale element. Hopefully clear. So if you've not signed a contract up, so if you still haven't signed and you're effectively on the variable tariff with whoever your supplier is, it's a real lottery out there, I will say. I've actually been checking through these today to see if any have been updated. There's some electricity suppliers that are charging 115, 125 pence per unit. We're used to paying 15 pence per unit. That's high. Contracting at the moment, you're probably looking at about 75 pence, something like that. So, 115p is very expensive. Avoid it. And the real kind of important point with that is that price is likely to change very quickly as well. If you're non-micro business, they can change it instantly. So you could well be exposed to even higher prices as we head into winter, when obviously prices are more likely to be going up. So I would avoid going out of contract. There are some slightly strange examples where suppliers are still quite cheap on out of contract, but I would suggest that that's because we're still in October, and October historically is not a high demand month, and we'll see again that things ramp up. So yeah, definitely avoid being out of contract, get into a contract, whether that be 6 months or 12 months. You know, most the suppliers are coming back into the industry now. So, you know, we did have points where suppliers would not quote, they just didn't want business at some points. And now we've got the situation where, you know, generally we're obtaining 3 or 4 different supplier quotations a day for reasonable size supplies. So things are looking a lot more positive, but still the rates that we're getting are nowhere near what we're used to, unfortunately. What I would suggest for anybody that's got contract renewals beyond April 2023, so this kind of covers you quite comfortably into the 2024 as well, if you've got a contract renewal due, I would highly recommend a flexible purchasing strategy. And obviously we're talking about budgets today. Not only do you need to be looking at flexible purchasing where effectively you're spreading the risk, you're spreading that whole kind of you know, finger pointing at you that, you know, why did you buy energy on that one day? If you do a fixed contract, you're effectively putting a line in the sand and hoping that it's a good day to buy on. And what do you do in that situation where the market has dropped by 20%? Do you wait for the next day and hope that it drops another 20%? Likewise, if it goes up by 20%, do you think, oh, it might come down again tomorrow, and then it goes up by 50%? You know, it's a real conundrum of a situation with this current marketplace. So I'd highly recommend flexible purchasing. You're effectively delegating authority to people that know what they're doing to secure a spread of prices, so they might well purchase your volume 5 or 6 times a week potentially, and you're effectively following the market trends prior to your contract delivery point. So if you've got an April 24 start date, great. Come to people like us, we can secure flexible purchasing agreements, and our traders effectively trade with the suppliers that we nominate your energy on your behalf for you, and we can keep you informed as to what we've bought and what that future budget spend looks like. It's fair to say as well, if you look ahead to 2024, 2025, the actual futures markets are around half the price of this current sort of near-term market. And so, you know, actually making the most of some of those futures markets out to 24, 25 makes a lot of sense, and it effectively helps for you to build up a reasonable price moving to your delivery point. So I don't think anybody wants this situation where 1 year, you might have fixed a 12-month deal. It's at a low price because maybe it was in COVID and they were giving energy away at that point. So, you know, you got a really good rate then, but then you've got this massive step up the next year where, you know, it might be a 40% increase because the market's gone up, increased demand, whatever it might be. But then, you know, you might do a 2-year deal at that point, but then after 2 years, you might have a massive reduction. I think the aim of the game here is to try and alleviate the volatile marketplace and try and accept that you might not always have the cheapest price, but you've actually got a protected price that doesn't allow you to kind of be exposed to this very peaky marketplace right now. So kind of sometimes being middle of the road is a good thing when it comes to budgets, I think. And that's what I think a good flexible purchasing strategy will give you. So obviously the cheapest kilowatt hour is the one you don't use. So consume less and you'll obviously pay less. That goes hand in hand with the DFE's plan around net zero. And there's some pretty decent numbers that we need to start kind of aspiring to within our schools and multi-academy trusts. And I must admit, probably 95% of people I speak to say, oh, I've not really looked at net zero, and I've certainly not got a number, and no one's really talking about it at this moment in time. But where we've obviously got massively high prices on energy, it just makes perfect sense to then look at the future and look at investing money into actually saving you money ultimately. You know, the DFE are going to have to, I think, support you, no doubt, with helping you invest into things like decarbonising your heating systems to help achieve these numbers. But there's also a lot of things that you guys can do internally as well. So, you know, to think that you need to reduce your carbon emissions by 50% within 10 years, you know, when we start thinking about, well, at least 50% of your carbon emissions, probably more than that, probably about 70% of your carbon emissions come from your heating systems. So you're going to have to get rid of your dinosaur burning boilers. How are you going to get that done? How are you going to implement it? It's going to be a stretch. And that's where we obviously come in. This is not going to be a sales pitch, but I think this is important for everyone to do in-house if they can. If they've got the expertise to do it, then fantastic. Ultimately, you should be measuring your carbon emissions and consumption. You should be having things like audits. You should be having mini checks on what's been left on at the end of the day, what can be switched off. And certainly for weekends and over the course of holiday periods, you should be trying to prioritise, reduction of any sort possible. And I think actually to have an assembly where you talk about your energy prices and, the impact that perhaps for your future renewals might have if it's not hit you already, just really empowers people to realise how much good money that could be going onto resources is actually going into the suppliers' pots at the moment. And then in terms of delivery, that would be things like projects. So obviously where we're talking about decarbonisation of heating systems, highly recommend that you look into that. There are some funding schemes for that that are open at the moment. And we hope will be open again next year as well in the form of like SALIX grant money. So they're basically giving you money towards projects to decarbonise your heating system and also to have surveys done. So highly recommend that. But also, I will talk about this in a minute, but things like solar PV and LED lighting are just fantastic investments to be looking at right now with the market being high. And I don't think we're ever going to get back to a point, personally speaking, I personally don't believe that we'll see prices anywhere near where we're used to of sort of 15p for electricity, 2 to 3 pence on gas. I think, the future is probably going to be closer to 30 pence per kilowatt hour for electricity and probably about 7 or 8 pence per gas. So there's, we're going to have to get used to that. And that's all part of our energy transition. And hopefully we can all be part of that same journey. One thing that I would say, myself, I'm an energy assessor for display energy certificates, and I'm used to kind of going into schools and then asking, well, what's the point? Why do you bother doing this? And A, it's legislation, it has been since 2008, but B, actually it gives you a really good representation of how you're doing compared to other schools. And not a lot of people realise actually it takes into account your postcode, so it then looks up what your heating demand is in your locality and says whether you're doing better or worse. It adjusts it automatically for you. And it's always quite enlightening, I think, to business managers and estates managers when I just present back to them what their energy certificates are. It might be different blocks that they have, it might be different buildings or schools if it's a multi-academy trust. But just to look at it and see how they're doing in terms of electricity and gas, it breaks it all down for you on the actual certificate. And what the actual typical usage is, you can see if you're performing well or not. And it's a really good starting point for you to think, well, actually, I can see perhaps my fossil fuel usage is high, such as this example here is an F rating deck and school E. Okay, in that example, maybe I'll start with looking at why the heating system is not operating in line with what a typical school is. Maybe it's the BMS controller, maybe we've done something in terms of overriding it, maybe we've got a faulty sensor or something, or maybe it's just that you've been really badly estimated on your gas bill and it's a temporary blip. But these sorts of things can be investigated. Now, what I've kind of modelled here is the cost of if you left something on, so fully operational for a few hours, so 4 hours a day over 6 months. And I think the bit that people are generally shocked at is like these are little electric heaters, 1 or 2 kilowatt electric fan heaters generally that plug in underneath people's desks, keep your feet really nice and roasty toasty, but actually they cost an awful lot of money because you're paying for electricity on peak, which at the moment is, as I say, probably about 50, 55 pence up to kind of 75 pence, depends when you're buying it. But it's incredibly expensive. Avoid them at all costs, and obviously they are fire risks as well, so I highly recommend you confiscate those. And also things like hot water boilers that might be sort of wall mounted in staff kitchens and things, have some 24/7 time switches fitted to them and have them hardwired in and programmed, so they only come on at 5 o'clock in the morning ready for people if they come in at say 6, 7 o'clock, wanting a cup of coffee that is ready, but don't have it just sitting there at 80, 90 degrees throughout the night, throughout the holidays, and whatever else, because it's just wastage that no one can afford right now, and it's books that you could be buying for for use in the school and educating the kids. I won't go through this slide too much, but most people have got half-hourly electricity meters, and there's some really nice data available from them. Smart meter rollout is happening as well on non-half-hourly electricity supplies and gas, but that's probably not going to be for a couple of years, and there's been a big hold up because of lack of meters and lack of people to fit them. But most schools nowadays, even some of the sort of smaller to medium primary schools, generally have been upgraded to half-hour electricity meters where there's more things like servers being added, air conditioning's been added, all these good things that actually mean that your electricity demand has gone up. But the great thing about it is there's data. If you want to be an energy geek like me, you can actually go in and look at all of your half-hourly interval data and see what's been left on and when. And this is just an example of our portal. And you can do almost a bit of a heat map analysis that says, okay, well, let me look at every Sunday, let me look at every Saturday, what's going on. On this Saturday, I thought that we didn't have any lettings anymore or whatever, but it's really useful just for you to understand what's going on and sort of justify it really. And I think most people are really shocked at this kind of midnight to 7 o'clock in the morning perspective, which effectively forms your night usage on your electricity bill. If you've got a 2-rate tariff, this will be your night element. So midnight through to 7 o'clock in the morning. Not many schools actually have anyone there doing anything, at least I guess you'd hope not, but there generally is about 20% of your electricity usage used on that night rate. That's a pretty reasonable average that I've seen over the years for many schools. So trying to look at what's being left on. Yes, there will be some things that intentionally need to be on, such as the servers, such as fridges, freezers, and your catering equipment, but you do need to also have that little mini audit done, I would suggest, internally or externally. Sometimes fresh eyes coming in is really helpful as well, just to kind of spot things, but try and get that wastage down as much as you possibly can. This is rather a busy slide, but it just kind of goes through all the other things in terms of energy wastage that you could be looking at. One thing that I've noticed a lot where I've done audits myself only recently and extending back over the last 2 or 3 years is set points on heating times generally do not match when the actual occupancy actually is. I've seen where they can come on anytime from sort of 4 o'clock in the morning all the way through to 6 o'clock in the evening, but generally you don't need to heat it for that long, especially if things like heating optimizers are being used. The actual control system looks and sees when you need to switch it on at what time, bearing in mind the internal temperature and the external temperature. So that does it for you anyway. But if you can try and get it down and refine it down to this sort of 7 maybe o'clock to 2 p.m, I've worked out that you'd save about 24% off your gas usage. So that's obviously through winter, but it's a substantial amount. And for a secondary school, let's say that would probably be getting on around for £100,000 at current prices. So significant amounts of money. And just get the basics right. I guess that in itself is a real basic thing, but again, I'd probably say in about 30-40% of schools that go in, I see this as an issue. It might not be the main boiler house, but it might be extensions and different peripheral boiler houses that you see around the school. So yeah, definitely recommend you look at that. Also, things like cavity wall insulation and loft insulation. If you've got pitched roofs, it's a very quick win. It's very easy to have done, very non-intrusive generally, and relatively cheap. With the current prices, probably pays back in less than a few months. So just a no-brainer to get that done. It's a good investment. Weekend checks are mentioned, pupil audits. Again, pupils love getting involved, don't they? And trying to kind of pick up on teachers and people that have left things on, and they're very much on the bus of net zero and carbon reduction. So encouraging that, I think, is a really good thing as well. Reduce thermostats for heating as well, and also increase the set points on air conditioning. You don't necessarily need a freezing classroom. in summertime, it's, you know, okay, it might be nice if everyone's been out to play and then come and get freezing classroom. But, you know, I know it's actually interesting this summer going around some of the shops and things in France, it's 38 degrees, but actually you go into the shops and they're not as cold as they used to be. And they've all responded to the crisis and actually increased their limits on air conditioning so that it's not as cold anymore. But yeah, you obviously play with controls and try and kind of balance, I suppose, people's thermal comfort, which you can never really get right, but with the fact that you need to try and save energy as much as you can and mitigate the increases. I mentioned LED and solar, just again, a very good investment. There are ways that you can actually have those paid for as well through things like operating leases. And there's some decent companies around that have done them over you know, a few years now, and they're both tried and trusted technologies. Yeah, okay, payback times used to be about 10 years. So people are like, oh, I'll do it when I can afford it. But actually, this 2-year payback time is a high estimate based on current prices. I think there'll be lots of situations where payback time is closer to 1.5 years, if not better. So yeah, just make sure you look at that. And also, I guess this sort of feeds into the whole letting side of things and using your and recharging in appropriate ways. But just make sure that things like EV charging points, if you're fortunate enough to have those, and encourage them, really, really good, you know, if you can. But just make sure you're updating the rates. There'll be software that allows you to do that, and just make sure you're charging it out at the right price. And obviously, if you've got things like swimming pool letting and stuff like that, again, just make sure you're looking at the latest prices and make sure you're feeding them in. If you have got a swimming pool, make sure it's got a cover as well. Actually, I did go to school a couple of weeks ago that didn't have a cover, and make sure that you're trying to reduce your usage there as much as you can. Now, we are very aware that people do need help in all this, and you know, sometimes it's good to have those fresh eyes coming in. What I will offer you today is a free energy action plan. So we're actually, you know, we're a company of 250 individuals. We are dotted around the whole of the UK. We can come in and do a 10 minute, hopefully it'll be a little bit longer than that, a 10-point guide on the priorities that sit within your school. And that might be things like the boiler house controls, it might be things like insulation, it might be some real basic things that we picked up on that actually, you know, you weren't aware of. But it's not a full energy audit. We do those as well, which are really detailed, probably getting on for 20-30 pages deep. But this will give you a little bit of a starting point to kind of get you winter ready, if you like. So please do send me an email on that if you'd like for me to sort of book you in. We are taking bookings for sort of November into December as we stand, because it's been quite popular, as you can imagine. And there's my details in case you want to speak to me. So now we're over to questions, please, Anita, if there are any.
Yes, you're very kind, Chris, which we thought. So the first question we got was, how does a customer know what the non-commodity element is in their current charge?
Yeah, so in some flexible agreements, you'll actually see it broken down. But if you're in a fixed contract, the suppliers don't publish what your non-commodity price actually is. So what we can do effectively is work back from the date that you accepted a contract on, and we would estimate what we believe that wholesale price element would be, and therefore the rest of it would be non-wholesale element. So it's basically laws of deduction that then tells you what is your non-commodity price. It's interesting to me that prices for non-commodity on electricity have gone up quite substantially this year. It used to be about 15p for electricity, maybe sort of as low as 12 if we go back, say, a year. It's gone up about a penny a year pretty much in recent history. But actually it's extended up to about 25p this year. And I think there's an awful lot of supplier risk premiums, and also no doubt them probably putting in a hell of a lot of margin as well, because, well, there's not that much liquidity in the market. There's not many suppliers pricing. So I guess they think, well, if we're pricing, we might as well make some money out of doing it. But also there's a hell of a lot of risk for customers where, if you imagine their £100,000 contract that you had last year is now becoming a £1 million contract this year. If somebody defaults, if they go bust, then they're left with a lot of expensive energy that they then have to sell back, that then obviously puts their business model at lots of risk. So they are kind of including these insurance premiums that again follows the fact that the markets are high, but unfortunately the government aren't looking at that. They're not capping or reducing that bit stays the same. The good news, and something I probably didn't cover actually very well, is just on the gas side of things. Gas is relatively straightforward. Most of it is commodity. So where they're reducing it down to 7.5p, I would expect that the price would be something in the region of about 9 by the time you include the non-commodity element on gas. It's just the electric that's got a lot more of all these different prices built into them as a sort of set basic price, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much. Hopefully that person's still on the chat, but I'm sure that's really useful for everybody else, which brings us on to the next one quite nicely, which I think you did go over, but just in case somebody has dropped off and jumped back in, just out of interest, what are the current gas prices? Maybe covered in later in the presentation.
So current gas prices, we're seeing, I sort of alluded to it, the price actually came down quite substantially yesterday. I think if you were looking at a 12-month contract now, you'd be in the region of about 70 pence for electricity, roughly, sort of maybe in the high 60s now. It depends. I mean, the market changes literally 10 to 15% in a day at the moment. So, do not quote me on this. Gas, you're probably getting down in the region of kind of like the 16 pence per kilowatt kind of area. So yeah, I mean, we did see prices as high as over £1 a kilowatt for electricity fixed only 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the gas was coming in at sort of 25, 26 pence. So it's come off substantially compared to that point, which is no doubt good news, but it's still massively high. I don't think anyone would have, I certainly didn't think I'd ever see prices like this in my career. So yeah, it's definitely a pretty freaky situation, but one, as I said earlier, I think we need to kind of get used to and look at a decent strategy for flexible purchasing.
Thank you. Does it make sense to enter into a contract in winter where you will get winter pricing and it is currently capped? Can you not have a short-term agreement?
So the shortest term agreement that we tend to see is possibly 3 months, but that's only if you've got a decent volume that suppliers will be interested in. I think in terms of context, suppliers, haven't been that interested in quoting, and their risk departments have stopped them from quoting. And then if you think about it, most people have left their decisions, if they have got a contract renewal this year, till later on. And so there's a mammoth amount of work that then is being kind of stockpiled into this current period and over the last kind of 3 or 4 weeks since the government price cap was announced and how that's going to work. So yeah, suppliers are not necessarily bending over backwards to take on your business right now. So if you go in and say, well, I've got a 10,000 kilowatt hour supply, which is relatively small, really rural, primary school, maybe 2 classrooms. In that situation, you say, I only want a 1 or 2 month contract. They'll laugh at you and say, see you later, then go find a price from somebody else. Whereas if you're a big multi-academy trust with 10 gigawatts of electricity, then yeah, we probably could, it would be perceived by them as more worth their while, I suppose. But it's all down to the suppliers, and as I say, the situation changes by the day, and we're having more suppliers entering the market. So again, there's more competitiveness, and that's helping to keep them honest ultimately. So what was the beginning of the question? I think I've half covered.
They said, does it make sense to enter a contract in the winter where you'll get winter pricing?
Yeah, so winter pricing is always in the predictions. So when we look at the forward markets, they actually project the prices forwards based on the current sentiment of the marketplace, and you can start to buy next winter. You can now. You can wait till January in the midwinter and start hedging volumes for the summer or whatever winter. It's all taken into account by the traders, and the traders are trying to work out what makes sense to them to be bidding and what's been accepted by the industry in terms of the prices. So I guess it's all about what's normal and what's not normal. So things like, we're now in a new world of normal, right? But what we've had affect us this week is the fact that we've actually had very windy and mild conditions, and the future weather forecast for the next 2 or 3 weeks, the longer term sort of forecast, is showing that we're going to be milder than what they expected. So again, like, that would have been accounted for the week before at a different price. They probably, well, they didn't realize that was going to happen, so their predictions at that point drove the price. But now that there's reduced demand as a result of those two influences, we're actually seeing the prices are softening off really nicely. So in contrast to that, if we have snow for 2 or 3 weeks, you would not benefit from fixing the price when you're in that condition, because no doubt the market will react to that, and they'll be looking at higher demand, and generally the prices will go up. So it's all about what's normal and what's abnormal, and trying to kind of almost preempt it. But I've secured prices for customers many times during winter at a long way in advance of their contract start date, and it's paid off massively. So I wouldn't have that perception that it's a bad time to buy at all.
Okay, brilliant. One from me, Chris. If you could give us one bit of nugget of information from your slides, top tip for people on the call, what would that be?
I'd probably say go into the boiler houses and check your control timings. And if you ask your caretaker or your other caretaker, and you believe that the servicing company that does your boilers do those checks for you, so you don't therefore need to, I wouldn't necessarily trust that. I would ask for someone that is a specialist to come in and check for you if you can't do it, or just check it yourself, because I always hear, oh yeah, it's fine, don't worry about it, and I always, oh, do you mind if we just have a little look at it? And that's when you then find the horror stories of what's on and what shouldn't be on ultimately. And there's some real good opportunities for reduction. So yeah.
Cool, perfect. I've got one more I think Julie wants to ask, and then I will stop wrecking your brains. We've been told that only contracts signed after the 1st of April 2022 will benefit from the price caps. Is this correct? Second part of the question. And that cap won't be 21p and 7.5 pence. Those numbers are the government supported discounts on the wholesale price only, doesn't take into account all the extras and the invoices. And with that, the government discount, the new rates will probably range between 35/40p and 10p. Is that correct?
Yes. And so, yeah, it's only applicable to contracts that are after April. Signed after April if you're in a fixed contract. So it's after April if it's fixed. It doesn't matter if you're in a flexible contract when that was signed. They'll work out the wholesale rate and they'll discount it. So there's a differentiator there. In terms of the element, I mentioned the wholesale, non-wholesale, so it won't just bring the price down to 21.1 and 7.5. You've got this extra price that's in your unit rate that you need to take into account. On electricity, where you've got this kind of the 21.1 of wholesale, you need to add that to the non-wholesale. Likelihood is that non-wholesale is anywhere between 15 and 25, depends on when you secured the deal. So yeah, you're going to have to add those two together. So you're probably looking at what, 35 to 45 pence per unit on the elec, and as I said earlier, probably about 9-10ish on the gas, just to give you a bit of a feel for it. But unfortunately, the government scheme, it doesn't go into the detail of how it all works, and they haven't published what the actual wholesale price is for each day as yet. So there's all these different indices, and we use our own indices that that calculate what we believe the price to be. But ultimately, until they kind of put their mark in the sand on that, and I'm not sure the suppliers know either, it's very hard for us to be any more specific than that.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Chris, for all of that information. It's been so insightful, and thank you so much for coming on today. Chris's details are on the screen. However, there will be a survey at the end of the webinar, which will give you an opportunity to request slides. I will send all those details over to Chris and share your details. But thank you so much, Chris. Now, just to let you guys know, Vivify does partner with Zenergi. So if you did want an audit of your facilities from Vivify to see how much we can generate for your lettings, and you're a little bit concerned on how that's going to impact your energy costs, Chris has very kindly offered to run some costs for you to actually see what it's going to cost you, because he has told me previously it would be quite surprising. A lot of people are quite concerned with the costs when in hindsight it's not actually as much as you may think it is. And there are a few tips which Chris can actually give you to drive those costs down, in terms of, for example, the type of lights you use, smaller changes that can be done so that your return on investment could be a little bit more, which is what we want. So thanks so much, Chris. We are now going to hand over to Abbie from Schools Advisory Service, who's going to speak to us a little bit about protecting your budget and a little bit about wellbeing, I believe. So I'm going to hand over to Abbie.
Perfect, thank you. Oh, I think the camera's still blocked, Anita.
Be able to bear with me.
Thank you. Yeah, perfect. Hello, everybody. My name's Abbie. As Anita said, I do work for the Schools Advisory Service, and I just would like to probably have a bit of a chat today. It might not be cheery from the get-go, because we are going to be discussing obviously some things that do affect school budgets and do affect people's mental health in schools. So yeah, have a bit of a chat about protecting your school budget through insurance and wellbeing, and how having something in place for your staff members should make kind of an all-round package for everything from morale in the school all the way down or up to your budget as well, and protecting that. So it is becoming a bit more of a prominent topic, I think, staff wellbeing, workload, and I know that for a lot of the schools that work with SAS, it's becoming more of a strategic priority, wellbeing is. So that's a really nice thing. And obviously it is a bit of an insight on maybe the wave of new mindsets that might be coming. And then hopefully that obviously makes a nice difference to every single school that we work with. However, the NGA report that came out recently, that was the top 5 challenges facing school leaders. You see the top ones: ensuring a broad and balanced curriculum, improving attainment at number 2, support for pupils with special education needs, pupil mental health and wellbeing, staff wellbeing, including workload, and then ensuring best use of resources. But in the top 5, staff wellbeing, including workload, and pupil mental health and wellbeing is part of that, which is great to see. However, it's still on the lower scale. We wonder why, maybe that it isn't still as spoken about as it should be. It still isn't as less of a taboo as we'd want it to be, talking about people's mental health, about people's physical health, and everyone being a little bit more open within their workplaces, especially with their management team who make these decisions for them, because obviously this was aimed at school leaders. I'm not obviously discounting anything that comes before it, far from that, because obviously you'll see that all the things on that list are very important when it comes to schools, and most importantly, a child. And that's what we really care about at the end of the day, the children, the children's education and their lives at school, because a child's life at school is completely different to the life that they have at home. I remember my own education. It was like a lovely place to go, to escape to, and to have fun all day. But if obviously our world in education revolves around the children, as it should, when did the teacher's well-being not positively or negatively impact that part of a child's life, their school life? It does at the end of the day. I had a teacher at school who was my registration group teacher, my form teacher. He was amazing. He was so caring. He was so supportive. He wanted the best out of all of us. We were his first registration group. He was a young teacher. And all I can remember is him going off sick a lot due to his mental health. He eventually did tell us when we got to like year 10, and he thought maybe we were old enough to have that discussion with him. But he did stand in front of us all and he did say, a lot of these last 5 years with you, I've not been here because of my mental health. And he actually left immediately after we left school. So he stayed for us. He stayed at a school that didn't support him and didn't provide him with the right services and the right support for his mental health just for his students, and that's amazing. But that shouldn't have happened in the first place. He shouldn't have been itching to leave. He should have been waiting for the next registration group to come in and shape their lives like he did mine. And now I know he is at a good school and he is being looked after. And I know that the school that I went to has now made massive differences in what they're doing, and a change in head and everything has made a huge ripple of happiness throughout that whole school. So it's lovely to see that. The last 2 years, so I'm probably not going to cheer anyone up right now, because obviously they haven't been great, and we have just been having conversations about how hard the budgets are at the moment and how difficult it is to work in education at this moment in time. But even if you take our jobs out of this and this sector away from lives and everydays, we've had a worldwide pandemic which not only closed our schools, our towns, our businesses, our cities, our countries for the best part of a year. So that was weird, as we'll all probably agree. We have environmental change, climate changes that consistently affect our day-to-day life. I mean, whether you really care about the individual aspects of all of these, they're all in the back of our minds. We're all driving electric cars. I mean, we're all thinking about putting our heating on, stuff like that. So it does affect your life. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and I know this is a first-hand kind of frontline thing for a lot of the schools that are maybe on this webinar today, because a lot of you have Ukrainian children. So you're going into school every day and seeing those. But even for those of us that don't work frontline with Ukrainian refugees and have to hear those things, we still watch the news, we still hear it, we still listen to the radio. And it is an anxiety. It's obviously going to get to people. Obviously a fair amount of political unrest and the ever-changing Secretary of State of Education. I am on SBM Twitter and teaching Twitter. I know how much this is a big problem for everyone and how much it's affecting everyone and giving a lot of people a lot of anxiety, as it will and as it should. Everyone's entitled to feel any way that they want to about anything, and this is one thing that directly affects all of you. A changing monarch, which was a very sad time for us all. I think we're all kind of still adjusting to that. My whole life, I've never been able to think of saying the king. So I think there's a bit of anxiety, obviously, in the country right now about what will change now Her Majesty has left us. And then last, but obviously absolutely not least, as you've just heard previously, the cost of living crisis. We're all kind of pinching pennies and, you know, saying, oh, I won't spend money on that this month because of this. And our lives are changing, and you're going to have to start making differences. The holiday that you was going to go on in this six week period probably might not have happened in the way that you thought it was going to, because of everything that's going on. And it is once more another anxiety to add onto the pile. So every single person that I could even think of, even those whose mental health is thriving, they're living their best life, will wake up thinking about something on that last slide, if not more, maybe, if they're more read up on some other things that maybe I'm not and I've even mentioned. Stuff that doesn't even affect them directly, it will still affect them directly, if you know what I mean. But then if you think of the day-to-day struggles faced by some in your schools or yourself or even anyone that you know, what if they're caring for dependents with health problems? If they're the only person that that person has to be around to look after, and then they have to go to work after waking up in the morning and you know, starting that person's day, they then have to start their own. If the next slide goes. Dealing with chronic illnesses themselves. A lot of staff members in your schools, as I know from insuring, a lot of them do deal with some illnesses that they still get out of bed and they still come to work and they still do their job. But they do have to have, you know, the odd doctor's appointment here to check up on the progress of what's going on with their lives and their medical needs. They still kind of power through and they come in and they look after the children. Facing financial difficulties and debt, even before the cost of living crisis, this is a very prominent thing in almost every area, especially, you know, in the teaching sector, because a lot of the staff probably don't earn the money. And yeah, it's something that obviously does cause a lot of anxiety. If anyone's ever been through any kind of financial difficulty, you know, it does eat away at you. And it does get to a point where it's all you can really think about, especially when there's children at home who's got rumbling bellies and it's all you can think about. Relationship breakdowns, divorces, that eats into your day-to-day thinking. If something that's been your life for the last 20 years suddenly isn't, it's a huge transition for someone. And if they still come to work and they're still facing everybody and putting a smile on, then that's amazing. Their partner being made redundant, that happened a lot during COVID. A lot of people were let go from their jobs. Obviously, our teaching staff thankfully weren't, because they were very much so still needed. But if their partners had been made redundant and they had to then think about where that extra money is coming from, it was really hard to find jobs during COVID. That sounds really dramatic, domestic violence, and I know it sounds like a really heavy thing to put on here, but it does happen. It is happening in people's homes, and they are still coming to work and they are still facing it because they may think that that's a normal part of their lives. It happens. All of these things are part of everybody's day-to-day. May not everybody, may not every single one, but I'm sure at least one of your staff in your schools has had something like this happen to them. Legal issues as well, which might fall hand in hand with, you know, divorces, but if anything has happened to them, they've been in a car accident, anything like that, and they're dealing with legal issues alongside of it, once again, it's something that's going to consume their mind and probably put them into a state of anxiety, depression, mental health issues that are going to arise up off the back of this, because they're probably pushing it down a lot with having to be at work and be a smiley teacher every day. So it took me, I mean, it only took me about 10 seconds to think about all the things on the first slide, and probably another 10 seconds to think about everything on that. There's more, there'll be more that's going on to all of your staff. And if you think about them dealing with that, then coming to work, and maybe, you know, you've got your safeguarding staff members, they're having to deal with whatever's going on in a child's life, poverty, they have to adapt to every child that they safeguard situation, and then have that in their mind when they go home to all of that too. And then if you think of that times 30, if they've got 30 children in front of them, and then you think of the SLT in your school who have got maybe 15 classes, 30 times 15, and it's just on and on and on. And it's going to get to a point where if they aren't allowed the proper support, and if they're not given the proper support services to kind of deal with these things and speak them through, they are going to end up either not performing to their full potential, or having a bit of a breakdown and having to go off of school, which obviously then makes a difference to your budget. So we've been discussing this, and I know it's come up a few times during this webinar, which is the shortage of staff members and the people who are leaving the education sector at this moment in time. It's really high numbers. It's hard to retain your staff. You've just got to ask yourself, in every school that's listening right now, what services have you got in place to support them? What support system is in place to make them aware that they are supported? Because obviously over half of those surveys with the NGA, 53% said that their school or trust found it difficult to recruit teaching staff, which is an increase from 21% since 2021, 29, sorry, since 2021. So I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I went to a trust the other day and had a conversation with them about supporting the entire trust. And they said all of the stuff that you've just explained and that SAS offer to schools is exactly what we want, not only for retention, but for hiring staff, because they're going to be able to say, like, when you come and work with us, you get this, you get counselling, physio, mindfulness techniques, everything. It goes on. And everything, and what the COO kept saying to me is that she loves it because it's all going to nip it in the bud. And so it is a sales tactic, really, even from, you know, your perspective in schools, when you're trying to get new teachers to join your kind of your family in your area and your culture, that you have this well-being culture that supports them. It will just fall hand in hand with not only recruiting but retaining, because at this moment in time, 30% of new teachers leave the profession after 5 years. That raises to 40% after 10. Now, you can all probably ask yourself or think of the reasons why you might have seen this happen, or I mean, over in the last year, I think there is a huge percentage of that have left within the first year. It's been a difficult year for education, and it's been a difficult year for everyone, like I've said on the first couple of slides. So yeah, the shortage we need to kind of nip in the bud, make sure people feel supported, that they've got the avenues to travel down. And I'm sure you're all aware of the pressure and the difficulty of recruiting. So when they leave, they're citing burnout, stress. These are all the causes that they're saying they're leaving education. And it might be work-life balance and the workload full stop. But at the end of the day, work-life balance, workload, that is going to cause stress and burnout. So you just need to kind of ask yourself what there is in place for you and what there is in place for your staff. Because last year, around 80 to 90% of your budgets were spent on staffing alone. Now, that's an obscene amount. And obviously, with the pay award, granting your staff anywhere between 5 and 8.9% of an uplift on their wages, that's going to go, that's more now. So the figure's going to be higher. And with no further budget allowance, this is something that definitely needs to be protected. I mean, you wouldn't buy a house and not insure it. You wouldn't buy a beautiful car for yourself and not insure it. I mean, my car's not even that beautiful and I insure it. So it's one of those things that you have to put a level of protection in, and whether it's through wellbeing support through SAS. I know that some of you already use it who are part of the webinar right now, some of the schools that I've previously worked with. It's nice to see that people are making these steps toward actively transferring the risk. So it's obviously not just transferring the risk of an insurance standpoint, but protecting this huge part of your budget with wellbeing also. Because if you have lots of absences, there's that, and then you're paying for your absences on top of it. So if we can keep them low, keep the staff happy in school, not feeling like they have to actually go off and then ask for help, they can ask for help and, like I said, nip it in the bud, then it's all about the budget at the end of the day. The budget will be protected alongside your children not having any disruption to their class. One teacher one day, one teacher the next. They'll have that one teacher that they have a really warm feeling toward, who always has looked after them, not kind of disrupting their education because they feel like they can't actually function and they can't focus anymore, which is what happens. So it does take me into the mental health support kind of thing. So according to Mind, 1 in 4 people in any given year experience a mental health issue. That's quite a high number for me, especially if you've already got, if you've got 20 teachers, you've got 5 of them going off with mental health if they haven't got the support in place so they can feel like they're still a functioning, active person. Anyone who's ever experienced a mental health issue or has anxiety, has depression, knows that it's one of those illnesses that will floor you and get you to a point where you probably won't be able to leave the house. You probably won't be able to look into people's eyes without the proper support. So if we can instantly provide them with something to access, let's get them happy, healthy, mind, body, spirit. I always say that because we do take a really holistic approach to wellbeing also. June, who's our mindfulness expert, she does amazing one-to-ones, and literally you can just bump into her downstairs in the office and she'll just make you feel mindful in that moment and have a really amazing kind of reaction straight away to what she's saying. And if anyone was just a little bit open-minded, they would be able to have the same thing. And that's what June's there for our staff members anyway that use SAS. But that's one of our figures there. So staff accessing our mental health support services has increased 400% since 2019. So a bit of a scary number, 400%, but it's a good thing. It's a really good ripple because it shows that this taboo maybe on mental health and the anxiety of people speaking up is lowering. They're reaching out to us. If you give your staff members the tools and the services, they'll use them, they'll access things if they're presented to them. And that's what that shows. The average adult in the UK will have to wait 18 weeks for mental health intervention, which blows my mind. Because once again, if you have ever gone through anything, and you've got yourself to the point where you can ask for help and you feel strong enough to ask for help, then them turning around to you and saying, okay, we'll see you in 18 weeks. What is going to happen in those 18 weeks? I mean, it's funny because we do actually have an internal Teams chat where we post our little wins, and the wellbeing team are amazing. They post really nice testimonials from our schools talking about the wellbeing support that they get. But yesterday was quite a nice one, and it fell in quite a nice period for me to bring it up today, because we had a staff member ring and ask for mental health intervention, and told us that the NHS had told them that it was going to be 45 weeks until they could have long term. So it was like, what's going to happen to that staff member if they didn't have us to ring and they didn't have our nurse team to speak to, who would then refer them to our counselling experts and get them a one-to-one counselling over the video, over phone? What would have happened to them in 45 weeks time? You don't know. I mean, the worst case scenario would probably come to your head, but even just them, like I said, not performing to their full potential, that make an effect on the child's education, the children's upbringing, because at the end of the day, they are bringing children up alongside of their parents. They see them for most of the day. And if they are showing any kind of sadness, anxiety, it's going to mirror and it's going to be picked up on, because children are they're very acute to understanding emotions. And we need to make sure that immediately they've got the short-term intervention until we can get them sat with someone long-term. And that's what we did. So that staff member has actually turned around to have an appointment within a day. So they're not going off school, they're staying in school, they're being supported, and they have the whole abundance of mental health support that we offer to schools there for them, which comes complementary with the policies. So that was quite a nice little story that came through from the nurses yesterday. That's just one of our figures as well. 240 sessions of counselling per week is roughly what we're doing. I believe it's probably more than that right now. That was last year's statistic. So I believe we are probably supporting more staff than that. And when I spoke to the nursing team yesterday, they did say that there is no waiting time for mental health intervention with SAS, which is a nice thing to hear too. So 1/3 of our absence claims, I don't know why it's coming separately, are due to mental health issues. So that's quite obviously a big number of the claims that are logged from your school business managers. Some of the ladies in this room and gentlemen in this room, you'll know what happens in your schools. And 1/3 of all services accessed are mental health support. There is absolutely no coincidence that those two figures are the same, that they mirror each other. If you, like I said previously, if you are giving the staff the services and you're telling them that they can use it as and when they need it, then they will pick up the phone, or they'll use the app and they'll reach out, they'll email the nursing team. They will reach out if you provide them with the support to have a conversation with someone, whether they actually are going to sit there and tell them everything, this counsellor, everything that they have on their chest or have been carrying in a mental health backpack, which is finally weighing them down for years, or if they're just going to sit there and test the water. Whatever they need from us, they can do, and we're just here to listen. And the nurse team do it as well. They are very much so untrained counsellors. They sit and they listen and they signpost and they get people booked in for whatever they think that they need. So just giving someone that option is worth so much more than not. So just some questions for you guys, really. What does your school have in place to help bridge the 18 or 45 week gap between, us, the first port of them saying that they can actually go for help and they want help, to the NHS being able to actually fit them in because of the state of people's mental health at this moment in time? It's not great. As obviously, as you transition into winter as well, people get a lot of environmental and like autumnal and winter depression, which does happen. The sun goes away, everyone gets a bit dreary, as it is today. So what have you got in place? Have you got a mental health lead in your school to prioritise the wellbeing? Have you got someone who, I spoke to a school the other day who's even had mental health leads in their pupils. One of their pupils was a mental health lead in each year at a primary school, and they've actually have been telling children to go and speak to that child if they have any questions, or if they feel sad that day, to tell them, and then that child reports to the teacher, and make sure that everyone in that school is having a beautiful open conversation about mental health. And that's all we would want. And if it's starting from a young age and we're instilling it in people and children from that young age, they're going to carry on being open, and they're going to carry on being supportive of each other, which is a dream in any school and a dream in any business. So in 2020 to 2021, 45% of teachers took sickness absence, and that is purely sickness absence, not counting COVID isolation and shielding. So that's half of your staff. If you're counting it in each school, that's half of your staff being off. That's from the gov.uk website. I don't know how anyone could afford for half of their staff to be off and then cover them all. It's not quite possible, really, not with what the budgets are right now, especially with what we're transitioning into a really difficult area and a really difficult time for teaching and budgets. If half of your staff went off, what would you do if you didn't have either an insurance policy in place or a wellbeing package to kind of, like I said, nip it in the bud, that absence in the first place? If they have no support or proper hands-on support, if it's kind of just that telephone where they read off of a script that you kind of sometimes get through an EAP or something like that. I speak to schools who have had really bad years last year, and now they're looking at absence insurance, which is great because, like I've said, everyone's taking that step to start protecting their budget. But if you didn't have it right now and that happened to you, just kind of ask the question. I don't know where that money would come from if 80 to 90% of it, if not more, now with the pay rise, is going on staffing. There's not a lot to spread elsewhere. So why would you not kind of protect that and make sure that there is a safety net in place to keep your school running if you surpass what you have actually set aside for absences that year? Because there's always a set amount for absences in a school, but if it goes past that point, where are you going to go, and how are you going to keep supporting the pupils with cover, and make sure that your staff, once again, aren't getting burnout because they're covering and moving around a lot more than what they actually should be. The positive news, try to do some for you. So I just need to move this thing out of the way. In 2016, 91% of staff that were accessing our mental health support services were already absent from work. They'd gone off sick, they've been off for months. The SBM or the head who's been out to see them has said to them, listen, you need to do something, we need to get some mental health support in for you, reach out to SAS. Amazing. We're there for the people that do that. We're there for the people that can't function, and they do use us once they're off. However, now we've been kind of speaking more about people using these services before they have to have the time off and before they feel like they can't function. 5 years on, and even with everything that's going on in the last 2 years, this has improved with only 51% being absent already from school. So that's a really nice statistic for us. It shows that it's working. It shows that, like I said, the taboo's lowering and people are being more open, and we're having to support people and be able to support people before they're kind of locked in their room, and they can start making good steps towards, bettering their mental health. So it is a really nice statistic for us. So like I said, the social stigma surrounding mental health issues is changing. People are asking for help and getting support before they reach that crisis point, which is a really nice thing to think of. This is a testimonial. I went to an NAHT conference and I met a head teacher who came running over to me, and she was amazing. She was so lovely, bless her. And she was like, I want to give a testimonial, but I only would bring it up because of the topics that she discusses. So she said it was one of the most crucial decisions she's made since being the head teacher in her new school, which is the Trinity Catholic Academy. She said that when she took over in 2018, there was no insurance in place for her school, and exceptionally high absenteeism rates amongst staff, and that was 2018. So it's still prominent, it's still happening from then to now. It's probably raised even more, bless her, but she has it in place now, so she's okay. and they could have faced financial ruin, which is quite a scary thought. And she says she's never looked back. So she said it was comprehensive at a reasonable price, which is nice, but this is my favourite part. So she said that the staff know that herself and the governors have realised how much they value them by putting in place the insurance policy that has the wellbeing package with it. They know that they care about the physical health as well as the mental well-being, and it cannot be underestimated. So she's basically said it's one of the most beneficial conversations she's ever had. And now she's been with us since 2018. And like I said, she ran over throwing this testimonial at me, bless her, at a conference. It was on day 2 as well, so everyone was a little bit hungover on that day. So she was quite cheery to say. But yeah, it's really nice to see that schools and trusts and local authorities around the UK who use us are using the wellbeing, and off the back of that, lowering their absences and their use of it, like I've said, down to 51%. People are using it before they even go off. So, well, that's basically the end of it for me. I could probably talk about all the wellbeing services that we do until I'm blue in the face. I know a lot of you probably already are aware of them, because I've seen some familiar names in the attendees list. But if you have any queries, if you want to see the wellbeing packages that we offer, we do provide them separately. You don't have to purchase into staff absence protection if it's not something that's right for your school. We would never kind of shove it into your face if it's not necessary for you. A lot of schools do deal with the budgets and can, muck by with a set amount, and that we appreciate that. But wellbeing is only going to benefit and only going to lower the absences, lower the cost of the budget, and keep you safe over the next couple of months when it is starting to get a lot tighter and a lot more difficult.
Thanks, Abbie. That was really useful and lots of information to digest, really.
Yep.
I've got a question for you before I fire some across, which I've been thinking of. So from Lauren, I've got a few members of staff really worrying about mortgage/energy cost increases. I don't know if it will fall under mental health, but would like to prevent it getting to that point. Would counselling/wellbeing assist with this if I were to offer it?
Yes, Lauren, it's nice to hear from you as well, because I worked with Lauren when she first joined us. But yes, if your staff are struggling currently with the cost of living crisis raising and everything that's going alongside of it on a financial point at home, then of course they can reach out to the counselling team for support on that. The funny thing is, with us being an insurance company, at the end of the day, we can't advise on what you should and shouldn't be doing for your own financial support at home. We aren't an advisory service, albeit we're called the School Advisory Service. But yeah, we can't actually advise on a financial point, but our counsellors can offer support and then can also signpost to different services that you'll be able to use to start making better maybe, well, not better decisions, but different decisions at home for your own budgets at home.
I think that's a really important question as well, in terms of, obviously, with the energy crisis, so much that Chris mentioned, it's a real worry for people, and not only within education, but also at home. Yeah. So, we say at home, but as you've said, Abbie, it has a domino effect within their role as well. So when they're worrying at home about the financial implication of maybe their utility costs, it's going to trickle effect back into their workplace. So really important that there's services in place to help with wellbeing. I'm just going to invite everybody now, the panelists, to unmute, and if there's any questions in regards to budgets, then please fire away, and we're just going to have a bit of a question time. If you may unmute. Perfect. First one, which whilst we're on the topic of you, Abbie, and Schools Advisory Service wellbeing. So you said that obviously the costs, quite a lot. Your last testimonial, the lady said that she only invested within staff absence in 2018, I believe. So am I right by saying, was she self-insuring herself prior to that?
She had insurance at the previous school with a different provider, right, and then moved to Trinity. And then when she shopped around, she had not a lot to do with it at the previous school. She had a really hands-on and controlling school business manager who took it all and just kind of got her to sign. She said that she felt bad for that as well, because if maybe she'd have done some of the research alongside of the SBM and spoke about some of the different options, then maybe they'd have found this for the previous school. But yeah, when she was the only one kind of involved in the search, that's when she started having more open conversations about the wellbeing packages that come alongside of some providers, and then made the decision to join us because of how extensive it was.
Got you. Right, okay, perfect. Well, that's great. So I think a number of schools which I visited, for any of you have joined the call or dropped off the call. So I'm Anita, I work for Vivify Venues, which helps with community lettings. A lot of schools which I go into have said, you know, we can't afford staff absence, we can't afford these costs, our cleaning costs have increased so much due to the COVID period, I can't afford staff absence insurance, which is a great thing for Vivify Venues to be a part of, where we are putting money back into budgets. I think Abbie said that there's I can't remember your stat now, Abbie, but in terms of the investment back into staff absence, how you can prevent absences before they occur. Now, do you insure, you know, facilities team and caretakers and people like that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with our policies is they are completely, well, they can just be decided by the person who's writing the schedule up. It can be anything down to your caretakers, your midday supervisors, all the way up to your SLT. Every single policy, it's like they're like snowflakes. They're all completely different, which is a bit of a fluffy thing to say, but yeah, they're all different to each school. They can be completely customized, and I think that's what's nice about working with SAS for schools, is because they do have the complete autonomy to make the decisions for what works for them. If they need cover for their caretakers and midday supervisors, then they can have it, and if they need it all year round instead of term time only, they can have it. It's just whatever they need. We don't normally say no.
Perfect, lovely. Whilst we're on the topic of mental health, I think it's really important. Well, this call today was all about giving back to all of you attendees that are on the call to really help you and to give you some information to go away with and to support you. Now, Stephen mentioned it previously, there is a lot of staff turnover. It's a difficult place to work within education, and we want to try and prevent that. That's why Stephen's organisation is one of the reasons why they exist. Stephen, at the moment, how you speak to leaders within education on a daily basis, how is sort of budgets, how they're managing it, the deficit, really impacting leaders within education? What would you say is the common the conversation which you're having with them at the moment?
It's unsustainable is the headline. So I've just written to the minister for, well, the two ministers, the Minister for Schools and the Minister, so Baroness Barron, who has the portfolio for academies. So Minister Gullis and Baroness Barron, I've written to them and just said that this, you know, we have advocated for the optimization of resources and for effective resource management, but there is no more we can do, and the situation is, yeah, it's unsustainable when you've got, you know, many trusts up and down the country possibly declaring that they're not a going concern, because income and expenditure just don't add up, and reserves are being depleted at pace. Yeah, it's a very worrying picture, and frankly, you know, officials, ministers need to come clean and say, if they're not going to invest in education, they have to lower the expectations that they have on schools in terms of outcomes and performance, which is not the place we want to be in. I suspect they won't do that anyway. I suspect they'll expect exactly the same kind of service with a fraction of the funding to support it. So I mean, I'm not unique as a sector leader. Every other sector leader is screaming from the rooftops that this is an impossible situation, and it's quite ironic that, you know, before this all blew up, the energy crisis, the war in Ukraine, the other cross pressures that we're facing now. Government set out their white paper where they were talking about world-class teaching workforce, huge investment in the professional development of our leaders, closing the attainment gap, recovering from COVID. There were all these really kind of lofty ambitions, and lots of things to say. Well, that's great, and of course we want to get behind that. But where's the money? Where's the money to do all of this? Where's the money, and where are the resources? And yes, I mean, there is a conversation to be had around the variability across the system in terms of the way that money is deployed and resources are deployed and all the rest of it. But I think we're way beyond that now. I think we're in a space where it doesn't matter how efficient you are, what kind of innovation you've introduced, what kind of technology and systems you've introduced. It just doesn't add up. So yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's tough, and I wish I could offer some nuggets of optimism. All that I can say is that we're shouting as loud as we possibly can. We're talking to the right people. To be fair, officials, not so much ministers, but officials are saying, keep making the case, keep showing us the evidence, keep demonstrating the things that you're having to concede in order to make budgets balance. To what extent are you having to increase class sizes, remove particular subjects, really narrow the breadth of the curriculum? All those things we need to see that. So if colleagues on this call have got live examples of where they're having to make really unpalatable decisions, then let me know, and we'll add it to the list of the many things that we put forward. But no, it's incredibly tough. Yeah, and let's just hope that someone's listening, please.
For sure. I think all of us have had those similar conversations within education on people really struggling, and like you said, screaming from the rooftops. With you obviously speaking to officials at the moment, I think a lot more needs to be done, and it's not going to change overnight. It's certainly not going in the right direction. But I mean, I mentioned in my slides, we want people on this call essentially to try and be part of the movement and stand united together. I think what Stephen has said, what Abbie has said, what I've said, what Chris said, it must have rung true to your ears as well. I mean, if you're going through it, a number of different schools, if not all of the schools within this chat today, have probably thought about these exact same worries at one point. I know that all schools are different, but essentially the struggles which I'm speaking to schools about are all pretty similar. So one thing that we can take away from it, which we're getting pretty used to from the COVID period, we're all going through it together. So we can share some best practices.
Anita, just one thing, and this hopefully is helpful in terms of, well, in some small way helps with hopefully with people's mental health and their and where they are at the moment, given all of the challenges. School business professionals should not blame themselves for this. It is not their fault, and I know that colleagues will be having difficult conversations with head teachers, with faculty heads, and saying, look guys, you can't have that, or you're going to have to cut that, or in order for this to work, we're going to have to stop doing this thing over here. It's not your fault. It's not on you. It's on government. It's on the system. It's not on you. So don't take that personally. And but I know having spoken to many school business professionals over the last few weeks, that they do take it personally. It does affect them. They do feel like they're letting their schools down when they're saying that TA that you want, you can't have it, or you can't have those resources this year, or you can't have that new build that you really need. It's not on you. It's on the system, and we'll keep fighting your corner. But yeah, just try and remove that burden if you can, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that, Stephen. I think that's really important as well. I think we sometimes forget that we're calling these people professionals, and we've put this invite out to senior leaders and senior professionals within the industry. They are people, and I think when we care about the role that we do, and I think nobody, correct me if I'm wrong, and apologies for anybody that is in this chat that's getting paid more than what I think they are, but I don't think anybody goes into education for the money. They go into education to make a difference. And I think all of the panelists here is exactly why we do what we do, and why we've joined this call today, is to try and make a difference. it's not to earn big money and to, you know, to do things like that and to buy huge houses with the big paychecks that we get. We do it because we genuinely care. We want to help education. We want to help the children, whether you're a teacher or whether it's myself, Russell, Abbie, Stephen on the call, is to help leaders within education and to make it manageable. So I think that's a really important thing to take away from this call today, that this isn't personal, this isn't your fault, and managing school budgets, and which is the topic of the call, and income generation, it isn't your sole responsibility. And if your budgets are in a deficit, and if you are struggling to get those nice to have things, it's not your sole responsibility, but you know, you are amongst peers and colleagues, whether they're in the same school or within different schools, you're amongst people that are having the same difficulties. Russell, I'd just like to ask you a question in terms of, obviously you dealing with senior leaders, trust you've been dealing with senior leaders as well for many years. What would you say is the best kind of advice that you can give them from Vivify, in terms of, we can't change things overnight, but with the sort of options that we have available to help with community lettings, what possibilities could they kind of try and chip away at and help their individual schools or their multi-academy trust, for example?
Yeah, I think, you know, in terms of your presentation, Anita, you brought to life, didn't you, the real options around income generation, and you know, they are there, and those opportunities are there. We see both sides of that coin, really. So we speak to school business leaders that are in desperate need of income, but we also speak to hiring groups every single day that are desperate for facilities. So please know that, you know, you might be sat there looking at an old gymnasium that might be falling apart, but in reality, that is a huge community asset. So, you know, there are people out there that will book. But what I will say is, it's the wider opportunities that come around community lettings. So there's the obvious one of income generation, but we've seen some phenomenal case studies, particularly around admissions, you know, where schools have suffered significantly through reputational damage that might have taken place through particular Ofsted ratings or anything. But by putting together a very targeted and focused community lettings program, can have a massive impact on the reputation. And like I said, we've got case studies, particularly in around the northwest of England, over in West Yorkshire, where we've seen schools that have been academised and have maybe not taken the chance to rename the school and have stuck with the name, but now are struggling with admissions. So we've seen some fantastic case studies there. So yes, there's the obvious impact of community lettings and opening up those facilities, but it's more than that. It's being able to get people that might not necessarily have considered sending their child there and getting them involved at a very young age. That might be at football, it might be at dance, it might be at drama, that have a huge impact, that are complementary to the curriculum as well, where if, you know, certain curriculums are being narrowed, those kind of community lettings, you know, enabling local groups to take part in those physical and mental activities will complement that, but it will drive footfall to the school. It will, you know, it will give parents a different side of the coin when it comes to considering the school itself as well. So I would always say, don't just necessarily see it as quite one-dimensional. There are lots of other opportunities that come around opening your school facilities.
Absolutely. I think that's really important to know, that obviously it's not just feeding income generation, but it's also helping local businesses with theirs. You know, so many businesses, not only leisure centres, your larger institutions are being closed down, but with smaller businesses being closed as well, it's not only people's businesses, that's their livelihood, which is with the energy crisis and living crisis, it's only going to have a detrimental effect on people's mental health, which can obviously result for senior leaders being off within education, which is going to create another issue, which obviously leads into Abbie's slides of staff absence. Russ, how much roughly do opening your schools, if for schools that, you know, well, two questions. If people are already doing lettings at the moment, how much roughly are we going to be making more money for the schools? Is there any stats around that on increasing revenue? Because many schools do it themselves. What's the advantages of outsourcing? I know we say that we're an extension, but what's the advantages of outsourcing?
Yeah, so typically we see on average around about 50% increase. In some cases, it's, you know, 300, 400, 500% increases in income generation. And that's mainly because that's our sole job and our sole purpose. You know, we see school business leaders, we see people that are finance assistants, site teams. It can fall down to, you know, the people on reception. A lot of the time, you know, it can be money tins under the desk all the way through to Excel spreadsheets and diaries. So, you know, the way we see the big increases come is the fact that we just bring maybe a bit of a more targeted and focused approach, because we've got the time to. It's the only reason why we exist, isn't it? So, you know, we can provide the marketing support, we provide the technology and the booking platforms, you know, just providing bookings to be done online. We see roughly a 20 to 25% increase in income just through having that. So yeah, I think it's we genuinely see that increase come as a result of pure focus. And, you know, guess what? We've got a database over 100,000 hiring groups. So one email out to those 100,000 to let them know that that particular school in London or Bristol or wherever is now accessible. That's where we see there's a huge uptake there as well. So yeah, there's lots of case studies, lots of videos that we've got on the website, and again, tools and resources, more than happy to share, rather than it come from us, come from colleagues and peers. So if there's any school business leaders that we work with that are happy to kind of share testimonials and whatnot, and then we're more than happy to introduce people to them.
Absolutely perfect, lovely. That's really great. Abbie, there's been a few questions actually for you in the chat, so I'll just go over those before I wrap up. If an employee is off with stress or mental health issues, is there a limit of the amount of time which they can claim?
No, there's no limit unless the school sets it. We'll cover them for the full year if they obviously are covered for the full year in the schedule. So if they decide to put a limit on it, and that will also help the cost of the premium if they do limit that. So sometimes that does happen. It happens a bit more recently. Then we can do that. Like I said, we're pretty flexible. So whatever you need from us in terms of cover, you know your school, you know what your absences have been like and what they're normally relating to, then we will make sure that the policy is fine-tuned to be supportive of that.
Perfect. Do you have policies that cover COVID absences?
Yes, our policies do cover COVID. So I know that a lot of the insurance policies at this moment in time are retracting that level of cover from their policy wordings, but we can see it's still it's still a thing, and we still have a lot of claims relating to COVID. So yeah, we do cover COVID.
Perfect. Lovely. I think they're questions for you. One thing I just wanted to, I think Stephen's got a pop off for another call, but thank you so much, Stephen, for your time. One thing I'd say, Abbie, is with Vivify Venues, we offer two different solutions. So we've got a booking management solution, which doesn't require staff, and we have a fully managed solution, which we can staff it. Now, you said that your policies are fully flexible and that you can cover caretakers and facilities team, which for many schools that want to manage their lettings themselves, they would want their facilities team to obviously be covered. Well, I think they're covered for all year round. From my knowledge, the sort of normally facilities and caretakers are covered for all year round.
Yeah, if they would like to cover them for all year round, we can cover them for 365 days. You'd normally find you get some facilities staff that live on site at some of the bigger schools. And so that's why they obviously be there over the weekend. So we'd like them to be insured over the weekend if anything was to happen, as well as, you know, your 6-week holidays and all of your half terms. And then we do have an option that's all of the holidays minus the weekends, or just term time only.
Okay, so that's a really important thing for you guys to consider if you are looking at lettings and you're looking for more of a booking management solution where you have got, for example, someone on site which can lock up and close up the school. If, for example, you know, that person was to go off sick and you're fearing who's going to open and lock up the school, obviously with a staff absence insurance policy in place, if that's covered, you then do have that bit of money to be able to find some source elsewhere, whether that's asking somebody to do overtime at the school. But please do bear in mind, if you are looking at a fully managed solution and you don't have that stability at the school whereby somebody can open up Monday to Sunday and on weekends, Monday to Sunday is weekends, Monday to Friday and weekends, and sort of school holidays for your Easter periods, your Christmas periods, your half terms. Vivify Venues do offer a fully managed solution where you will be able to have staffing provided by ourselves. Therefore, if there is any absences due to sickness, because it does happen, we can't avoid them all, we will recruit enough staff for your school where there is sort of somebody in place so that all shifts can be covered. So your higher groups aren't going to be let down, the community which are enjoying the groups won't be let down, and we also have cover in place to ensure that our staff's wellbeing is looked after. A little bit about that. Now, I think all the questions are done, and we are 6 minutes late, so we're a little bit overrun. But I just want you to thank everybody on this call for joining today. And I really, really do hope that you found it useful. There will be a survey at the end of the call for you to request any slides from the speakers, and also to find out if you would find another webinar morning or afternoon useful, as we are hoping to run more of these, as we want to give back to education as much as we possibly can. Today was about you, and I really do hope that each and every one of you took at least one bit of information away with you, and it wasn't too negative, and we were able to give you some useful resources to help with this difficult time that we're facing. So I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to not only invest in your school, but also invest in yourself. As Stephen said, this isn't solely your responsibility, and this is not your fault if things aren't going to plan. But we do stand with you, and we do stand united within education. So, you know, everybody's details will be shared from the speakers. If you do have any questions which relates to one of the speakers' specific offerings, please feel free to message them. We work very closely with each and every one of them, and they are very similar to us in the sense that we really do want to help. So whether you're working with us or not, please, if you do have any questions, our inboxes are open for any questions. But thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'll leave it to Rush just to say bye to you, and then I'll end the call.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anita. As Anita said, fantastic, really, really good. And I think other than that, I hope you all have an amazing day, and we'll see you all soon.
Take care. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.